With some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Britain I grew up in was the most peaceful, gentle society that has ever existed. That has been destroyed.
Opinion polls show immigration is the #1 concern to the British public.
Are you proud to be British?
Yeah, I'm ever so proud.
My name is Stephen Edgington, and in this documentary, I want to find out how Britain became a nation of immigrants. Immigration, the Truth. Available from the 19th of September at gbnews.com.
Tune in to Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. GB News royalty with your perfect start to the weekend. Lucky us. Feisty and fearless guests.
Well, I'm a normal person, so ask me.
Honest opinions that raises more questions than a Gary Barlow tax return. And a few surprises along the way. Might be cold in this studio. That is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. 8 to 9, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
A very, very good afternoon to you. It's 3 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, of course, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster all across the UK. On today's show, after GB News exclusively learned that a Rotherham grooming gang survivor was denied the opportunity to demand that her abuser be deported back to Pakistan. Today, we're asking a simple question. Is it time to deport all 10,000 foreign criminals in British jails to help ease the overcrowding problem? Next up, Keir Starmer has ruled out Tony Blair's demands for digital ID cards for all citizens, but wouldn't a compulsory ID for all illegal immigrants be a compromise worth trying to keep track of and deport illegal workers on the black market? And Tory leadership frontrunner Kemi Badenoch has sat down for an emotional exclusive interview with GB News' political editor Chris Hope. Kemi reveals how the death of her father inspired her to stand for the Conservative leader, but warns, I won't work with Nigel Farage. And snowflake of the decade, a Liberal Democrat councillor has claimed that she has a diagnosis of PTSD over Brexit. Comparing herself to a fighter in Sudan, she added, Brexit has had a profound impact on me. Is she the Ramona of the century? And that's all coming up in your next hour. And another story here, a shock new analysis of NHS data shows that GPs work an average of just 26 hours per week, down from 30 hours in 2016. The report adds that doctors are unwilling or unable to work longer. Do these work-shy quacks need doctors' orders to work longer hours? That's all coming in your next hour. What was the show? We've got an action-packed menu today. So much to get our teeth stuck into. But before all of that, please make sure you get in touch. What about this big topic of is it time to deport foreign criminals? Astonishing, is it not? That a grooming gang rapist's rights were put before the survivor, who at the time this abuse started was aged just 11. She read out an impact statement in Sheffield ahead of the sentencing in Rotherham, and national reporter Charlie Peters was there. We've got the full exclusive statement she wanted to read out, and today we're going to make sure that she gets her wish. Get in touch, gbnews.com/yoursay. Now it's time for your headlines with Sophia Wenser.
Martin, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 2 minutes past 3. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. First, to some breaking news in the Middle East, where we're hearing reports that hundreds of Hezbollah members, including fighters and medics, have been seriously wounded when their communication pages exploded. You can see here footage appearing to show the moment one of the devices exploded. It's being described as the biggest security breach so far in nearly a year of conflict with Israel. A journalist for the Reuters news agency reported seeing ambulances rushing through Beirut's southern suburbs amid widespread panic, with explosions continuing for 30 minutes after the initial blasts. At this stage, there's been no comment from the Israeli military. The government say it is tackling small boat crossings on all fronts following news that 10,000 people have crossed the channel in small boats since Labour came to power in July. Home Office figures show 63 more migrants arrived on Monday, bringing the year's total to nearly 23,600, though that's down 1% from this time last year. The latest crossings follow the deaths of 8 migrants over the weekend as the government boosts funding for border security. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper's announced £75 million for more officers, cameras and technology to combat people smuggling. Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer says he's also looking at Italy's immigration policies for possible solutions. In other news, BBC boss Tim Davie says he can't see Hugh Edwards ever returning to the corporation after the disgraced presenter admitted to accessing indecent images of children. Speaking at the Royal Television Society conference, Davie called the former newsreader's actions appalling crimes that have damaged the BBC's reputation. He confirmed Edwards continued to receive £200,000 in salary until formal charges were made, but the BBC is now seeking to reclaim the money. He also says the victims' families remain the corporation's top priority. Now, Health Secretary Wes Streeting says the end of the pay dispute with junior doctors marks a first step in the government's mission to reform the broken health service. Members of the British Medical Association have voted to accept the government's offer of a 22% pay rise over 2 years. However, the Conservatives are warning the government not to set a precedent by awarding striking workers with what they've described as bumper pay rises. This morning, Deputy Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Daisy Cooper, told us her party still think more can be done.
Part of the answer is pay, but as I say, it's just a first step. What we Liberal Democrats want to see is a really ambitious budget in October. We want the Labour government to use the budget to be a budget to save our NHS and care services, and as part of that we want to see an increase in day-to-day spending, not by taxing struggling families but by reversing the tax cuts for the big banks and closing the loopholes in capital gains tax so the wealthiest pay a little bit more. But we also want to see borrowing to repair our crumbling hospitals and GP surgeries too.
Now, in the US, Donald Trump has spoken publicly for the first time since being targeted in an apparent assassination attempt on his Florida golf course. Speaking in a live stream on social media, the former president described being grabbed by Secret Service agents after 4 or 5 gunshots rang out. 58-year-old Ryan Routh is facing federal gun charges after a Secret Service agent spotted a rifle poking through the bushes and opened fire on the suspect. Mr. Trump's also praised his protection team and, in a rare show of political unity, commended President Joe Biden for calling him.
I was with an agent, and the agent did a fantastic job. There was no question that we were off that course. I would have loved to have sank that last putt, but we decided, well, let's get out of here. We do need more people on my detail because we have 50, 60,000 people showing up to events, and other people don't have that.
Now, staying in the US, an appeals court has upheld Ghislaine Maxwell's conviction for helping the disgraced late Jeffrey Epstein sexually abuse teenage girls. The 62-year-old has been serving a 20-year prison sentence after being convicted in 2021 on 5 charges for having recruited and groomed 4 underage girls for Epstein to abuse between 1994 and 2004. Epstein was once Maxwell's boyfriend. The 66-year-old financier died in a Manhattan jail cell in 2019, 5 weeks after being arrested and charged with sex trafficking. And finally, in sport, Glasgow will host the Commonwealth Games in 2026 after the Scottish Government agreed to back a scaled-down version of the event. The city last hosted the international sporting event in 2014 and has now stepped in again after the planned host for 2026 backed out. The state of Victoria withdrew, citing a rise in estimated costs, but has pledged a multi-million-pound investment if Scotland were to take over. Due to a lack of time and funding, some sports will have to be dropped from the multi-event games. One final breaking line for you. We now know the rapper Sean Combs, also known as P. Diddy, has been charged with 3 federal charges, including racketeering, sex trafficking and transportation to engage in prostitution. That's according to an indictment unsealed today. The 54-year-old music mogul is under investigation for allegations including sexual assault and trafficking after a number of women came forward. Combs has denied all the claims and his team insists he's innocent and ready to clear his name in court. Those are your latest GB News headlines. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sophia. Now, a Rotherham sexual exploitation survivor was ordered to remove a demand for her abuser to be deported, GB News can exclusively reveal. The woman gave a moving statement in Sheffield Crown Court last week, over 20 years after she was groomed and abused from the age of just 11 by the Pakistani heritage men. But the judge made her remove any reference to deporting her offenders. So I'm asking, the big question today, should we deport foreign criminals? And joining us now in studio is the exclusive story, is our national reporter, Charlie Peters. Charlie, first of all, hats off to you. You're the only national reporter to go to this victim impact statement. You were on my show several times. It moved me to tears at what this poor girl was saying. To find out if she's even denied her demand is astonishing. Tell us more.
Well, there are several sections that were removed from the victim impact statement, but by far the most important, in her view and indeed mine, is the conclusion. Now, when she delivered it in the court, she said to those 5 men in the dock, there were 7 defendants there, but there were 2 victims in this trial. She said, "You took my childhood, you took my innocence. Now I'm having my revenge. I'm taking your freedom. I am your karma." It was an incredible way to finish such a moving victim impact statement. But at the time, I didn't know that that is not what she originally intended to finish on. There was a further line, which is that she said, "I'd like to request that 2 of the men are deported after they've served their sentences." Those men being born in Pakistan, of Pakistan heritage, being dual nationals potentially, they could easily go through the process, through the Home Office, through the Home Secretary's provisions and the legal demand that this country has after the UK Borders Act of 2007. Any foreign national facing a custodial sentence over 12 months must be deported. Now, there are exceptions, obviously, due to the ECHR and the UK's Convention on Refugee Rights, but in this case, a survivor wanted to say that in the courtroom. She'd been denied justice for decades. She was groomed at a playground aged 11. She said she was abused by over 150 men by the time she was 16. Now she had a chance to speak to just 5 of them to show that she had won, they had lost. It was incredible. But part of it was censored by a judge, and I knew something had been removed because just before she delivered that speech, the CPS barrister spoke to the judge and said, whatever happens to them, whether they remain in the country or not, is a matter for the Home Office, not this court. Now, the judge, Mr Justice Slater, nodded in that conferring discussion, and then she came in and delivered that statement. She shared the statement in full with us since, and we can now reveal that this sentence on calling for them to be deported was censored.
It's an astonishing thing to deny somebody who, after all, has been through the most arduous ordeal. None of us can even comprehend what she'd been through. This was her moment to speak, not only to speak to them, but to look them in the eye. You were there. It was an astonishing confrontation, as you say, closure, or at least trying to find some kind of peace. Now, a victim impact statement isn't a legally binding document, but it's a chance to have your say. On what basis could it possibly be censored?
Yeah, I suppose the judge and the CPS barrister, just from the conversation I overheard briefly in those pre-sentencing submissions before the survivor came in to speak from the witness box, they said this is all about the Home Office, it's not relevant here. But I would have expected that even with the judicial oversight that goes into these statements, and they have to sign a commitment that they aren't going to be defamatory or say anything out of turn that could be liable for prosecution, I'd have thought even within that commitment, they might have given her the opportunity to speak on this point, to make this demand, a demand that I'm sure many of our viewers and listeners will hear and say that's completely justified. I should say, Martin, as well, I mean, I've been covering this story for years across the country, over 50 different towns where we've seen reports of these sorts of prosecutions. I can't find a single case where a grooming gang rapist in this sort of abuse has been deported. There's a notorious case in Rochdale, Kari Ralph and Adil Khan. They've both had their nationalities stripped from them, their British nationality, stripped their dual nationals. They were stripped by the former Home Secretary, Theresa May. Both of them a decade on were fighting deportation at the taxpayers' expense, I should add. They were ringleaders of the most appalling abuse. There was a house, a safe house, essentially, in Rochdale, where abusers would sign their name and tick on a box when they'd visited the girls who were kept there in captivity for abuse. It was, as I've described it previously, a sort of paedophile's honesty box. That man still hasn't been deported. A ringleader from the Rochdale travesty still hasn't been deported. I do know of other cases where men facing prosecution or investigation have fled the country. So we're now in a remarkable situation where more men have fled prosecution than have been deported by the state for this, a national scandal that has claimed thousands of victims.
Well, Charlie Peters, again, an excellent exclusive by you. It's certainly got politicians talking. Robert Jenrick, the future Conservative leadership hopeful, he said that victims will not be silenced. Well, Mr Jenrick, they have been. They have been. Lee Anderson said when vile perverts are caught, our judicial system still puts perpetrators before the victims. Rupert Lowe, also Reform, he's joining us at 4 o'clock. I know you're going to be back with us at 4. We're going to talk to him. They're absolutely flabbergasted that this is happening. And I didn't even know that. Charlie Peters, nobody has been deported in all of the history of these grooming gangs. That's astonishing.
It is an appalling situation, and Suella Braverman has also added her reaction, the former Home Secretary. She's called for more urgent deportation action to take place here. Last year, on the back of some campaigning from this channel after an investigative documentary, she launched a NCA-led grooming gangs task force, which was a brave thing to do. It's arrested over 550 people in its first year, trained up hundreds of officers. She also wants to see more action. When I spoke to the Home Office about this last night, they said they won't comment on individual cases.
I'm absolutely lost for words. Charlie Peters, we'll continue this conversation throughout the rest of the show. Again, brilliant work. Thank you for trying to do your bit to hold these people to justice. Let's continue this conversation now with the immigration barrister, Paul Turner, who joins us now down the line. Paul, welcome to the show. You must have overheard that. I'm simply astonished. I've been covering these stories for a long time myself, Charlie Peters also, to learn nobody has been deported for any of these cases. We know it's not racist to say the fact of the matter is the vast majority of these grooming gang perpetrators are British Pakistanis, in this case, Pakistani-born. We have over 10,000 foreign-born prisoners in our system. Back to this particular case, on what basis could a judge deny the simple moment of asking what she wanted to happen to this guy? It doesn't need to be legally binding. This was her moment to face evil in the face and make her statement. Why on earth was that censored?
Quite frankly, I don't know. I don't think... it's beyond me. I mean, I can't comment, particularly not having been at the hearing. I know that it was, and it must have been very upsetting. And the facts of it are appalling. But I can't see of a legal basis to have excluded her comments in respect of deportation, particularly given the fact that the Pakistani nationals will be, following the 2007 Act, they will be subject to deportation proceedings. That's beyond a doubt, looking at the sentences to 14 years and 25 years. They are going to face deportation. So I'm not sure why a victim of these absolutely appalling offences can't speak to what is going to happen in any event.
Well, the fact of the matter is, Barrister Matthew Bean, acting for the Crown, he said whether the abusers, remain in this country or not is up to the Home Office. Yeah, we know that. But they are remaining in the country, thanks to the Home Office. Charlie Peters just said not a single incident of them being reported. Putting that to one side, the survivor in this instance doesn't have the power to deport. It's a victim impact statement. She's waited years and years and years, over a decade, for this moment. And we've got people like Robert Jenrick, Lee Anderson, Suella Braverman, lots of politicians, thousands of GB News commentators and viewers stepping in and saying, who is this system supporting? Is it supporting the perpetrators or is it supporting the victims? And they're starting to feel this is looking after the rapists.
I mean, it's not often you'd find me agreeing with Lee Anderson or Suella Braverman, but on this, I'm completely in agreement. I think that the statutes are there to affect deportation, and practising in this area of law, the Home Office are, and I will criticise them when I think I can or should, they will do everything in their power to refuse somebody permission to remain. And if the individual appeals and seeks to rely on their human rights, the Home Office will fight very firmly to have them removed from the United Kingdom. My experience and talking to other practitioners is that the immigration courts themselves are no soft touch. They don't like these individuals and their offences. And it's my experience that the law is very firmly on the side of the state. The problem seems to be that after they've gone through the prison sentence, after they've gone through the immigration court, that they're just simply let out into the community. And the actual act of putting them on a plane just doesn't seem to take place.
It's absolutely astonishing. I just can't believe, I mean, the fact that she wasn't allowed to say it is one thing, but the fact nobody's been deported is quite another. I mean, Charlie Peters, I didn't even know that. It's just incredible. Thanks so much for joining us on the show, immigration barrister Paul Turner. We're going to continue this story throughout the rest of the show over the next 2 hours to try and make some sense of it. Now, moving on. In an unprecedented attack, hundreds of Hezbollah members have been wounded when their pages exploded. More on that with Mark White next. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Nana Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
So, for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, are non-crime hate incidents a breach of your human rights?
It's crazy, isn't it? Freedom of speech is now on life support here, and we've had, in the last week alone, we've had Elon Musk being threatened. He's now out of Brazil with X. We've had the founder of Telegram basically being arrested, and he's been charged in France. We're not quite sure the circumstances why he was there, whether Macron invited him to the Olympics or whatever, but he's been arrested under several charges. And we've had all sorts of people who've been speaking out are basically being shut down. So it has to be freedom of thought. It has to be freedom of expression. It's one of our fundamental rights under the Human Rights Act of 1998. Article 10 gives you the right to express your opinion and also to air that publicly.
It's basically I say something that somebody doesn't like, so probably one of my monologues. Then somebody can then inform the police that I've upset them in some way. And then that goes on my record, so I now have a criminal record. Because somebody else who I've never met, who's never met me, has heard something that upset or hurt your feelings. Then if I go for a certain job or I go for my DBS check, which I do regularly because I go and talk in schools, somebody can pull that up and go, well, you did something that had hurty feelings, and so now you can't have that job. That has got to be a breach of my human rights.
Oh, it's absolutely. Article 10, it's a fundamental right to protect your freedom of speech and so on and so forth. And this is what's really worrying, because it's happening around the world, as I say, in Brazil, in France, in various other countries. In America, you know, Zuckerberg, he came out in the last few days and said the pressure that he was put under by the Biden administration, first of all about COVID, and even jokes he was told to suppress them. The other thing that he was saying about the Hunter Biden laptop. And he said he couldn't speak about that because they were telling him not to. And what he did, he had to fact check, and he turned around and said he regretted that, because the reality is you're working on that sort of basis.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back. It's 3:23. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, an astonishing story next. Hundreds of members of the Lebanese armed group Hezbollah, including fighters and medics, have been seriously injured when pagers that they used to communicate exploded. It's been described as the biggest security breach the group has been subjected to in nearly a year of war with Israel, and the Israeli military are yet to comment. It's an astonishing story, and to explain it, I'm now joined by our Homeland Security editor, Mark White. Mark, an incredible story. Tell us all about it.
Yes, and still very much developing as a number of Hezbollah terrorists have been injured, reports of deaths as well. And we're talking not just dozens, but there are reports of hundreds of casualties, a mass casualty event it's been described as. Now, we've got some images we want to show you now, showing these pagers exploding. It's not particularly graphic, which is why we're showing you, but you can absolutely see the explosion in a second, the puff of smoke from the pager that's on that individual who clearly then is injured and hospitalised. Another one here in a market, someone that was wearing a pager, it blows up, that person ends up on the ground. Now, some of the injuries have been lighter. I guess that depends where the pager was, but some of the injuries much more serious. And it really has been an operation, it seems, that has detonated dozens, if not hundreds, of pagers right across Lebanon. We've got some other images we can show you now of one hospital in southern Beirut inundated with Hezbollah terrorist after Hezbollah terrorist coming into the emergency room in this hospital with varying degrees of injuries inside the hospital itself. Now, it is, as you said at the start, Martin, the most extraordinary story it has, without a doubt. It got the hands of Israeli intelligence all over it. But, you know, pagers don't just explode. Clearly, they're just tiny devices. The battery in them couldn't cause an explosion that would kill and seriously injure individuals. So these pagers have been got at. They've been taken apart. Explosives have clearly been put in them, and they've then been sent out to Hezbollah fighters. You can see that's one of the destroyed now pagers there. So just the elaborate nature of this operation, to be able to impregnate all these devices with explosives, then get them out somehow on a distribution network that was going to see them snapped up by this terrorist organisation. Definitely a coup for Israeli intelligence, but it is, without doubt, a very significant escalation, as well as Hezbollah describe it as the biggest security breach they've suffered since the start of the war in October last year.
So, Mark White, it's something straight out of an episode of Homeland in real life. Somehow, it appears, the military intelligence of Israel have replaced pagers with explosive devices. They've known who to get them to. So they've got to Hezbollah operatives in a coordinated device ignition sequence. They've all gone off, taking out potentially scores and scores of known Hezbollah terrorists. Aside from the fact it worked, Mark White, it's an astonishing breach of intelligence and an impregnation of a hitherto supposedly very secretive terrorist network.
Yes, I mean, it's really audacious in terms of what has happened here, being able to detonate these pagers, it seems, almost simultaneously right across southern Lebanon. Incidentally, Hezbollah now sending out, quite how they're going to do this, I don't know, urgent messages to their fighters and indeed medics that work for Hezbollah as well to ditch their pagers. It was Hassan Nasrallah, who is the leader of Hezbollah, that told his fellow terrorists a few months back that they to stop using smartphones because of the concerns that they're going to be monitored, impregnated by the Israeli intelligence services in terms of being able to monitor and listen to what they're up to. So go back to the 80s and the 90s instead with these pagers and take simple code messages across the paging system. But clearly, somehow, we believe Israeli intelligence, although they're probably never going to confirm nor deny their involvement in such an operation, have been able, Martin, to get word of this, to be able to get these pagers adapted and then somehow to some distributor who was able to give them to Hezbollah, no doubt, a knockdown price.
Thank you very much, Mark White. That's a brilliant story. Thank you very much for joining us. And we've got another GBNews exclusive now because Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer is resisting Tony Blair's calls for compulsory digital ID cards. The former Labour leader argues it would deter migrants from coming to the UK, but admits too many people are working unlawfully and the UK needs to be much stricter. Well, GBNews' political correspondent Catherine Forster joins us now. Catherine, a lot of people have felt that Tony Blair is pulling the strings. We all know he would love all of us, every man, woman and child, no doubt, to have a full barcode digital ID. You put that question to the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, earlier. It seems, for now at least, he's not copying Tony Blair.
Yes, good afternoon, Martin. For now, at least, Sir Keir Starmer is having none of it with the compulsory digital IDs that Tony Blair has made it very clear that he thinks that we should have. He feels that it would act as a deterrent, preventing people coming to the UK because, of course, a major pull factor of people coming here is the fact that you can pretty much disappear and work in the black economy. Digital ID, he thinks, would prevent that. But I asked the current actual Prime Minister about this yesterday after his press conference with Giorgia Meloni in Rome, where he was, of course, talking about illegal migration. I asked if they would consider it or if he would rule it out while he was Prime Minister. Now, he didn't rule it out, but he did say they weren't planning to bring them in. And he did also say that too many people are working unlawfully and that the UK needs to be much stricter. Now, he talked about increasing the number of inspections and also saying that businesses who are found to be employing workers who didn't legally have the right to be here would lose their ability to get visas to bring people in from abroad. And I think probably most of us will know of businesses and places locally where people are working that we might suspect are not completely above board. And I think at the heart of this is the issue of how do you stop people making these channel crossings without an effective deterrent. Now, Sir Keir Starmer is all about smashing the gangs, people getting here, stopping people getting here in the first place. But of course, the Rwanda plan was designed to be a deterrent, and Sir Keir Starmer scrapped that straight away, saying that it was just a gimmick.
Well, what they probably could do is give one of these cards to everybody coming here illegally, so at least we could then trace them. Catherine Forster, to Washington, D.C., to Rome. You've been asking the Prime Minister the best questions all week. Thank you very much for joining us here on GB News. Now, loads more still to come between now and 4 o'clock, including a ludicrous story. One Liberal Democrat councillor revealed she was diagnosed with PTSD over Brexit during their party conference. Is she the biggest snowflake on the planet? But first, here's your latest news headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Thank you, Martin. Good afternoon from the GB newsroom. It's just gone 3:30. These are your headlines. Let's recap on that breaking news in the Middle East, where we're hearing reports that hundreds of members of the Hezbollah terrorist group have been seriously wounded when their communication pages exploded. You can see here footage appearing to show the moment one of the devices exploded. It's being described as the biggest security breach so far in nearly a year of conflict with Israel. A journalist for the Reuters news agency reported seeing ambulances rushing through Beirut's southern suburbs amid widespread panic, with explosions continuing for 30 minutes after the initial blasts. At this stage, there's been no comment from the Israeli military. Now, in other news, the government says it is tackling small boat crossings on all fronts, following news that 10,000 people have crossed the channel in small boats since Labour came to power in July. Home Office figures show 65 more migrants arrived on Monday, bringing the year's total to nearly 23,600, though that's down 1% from this time last year. The latest crossings follow the deaths of 8 migrants over the weekend as the government boosts funding for border security. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper's announced £75 million for more officers, cameras and technology to combat people smuggling. Prime Minister Keir Starmer says he's also looking at Italy's immigration policies for possible solutions. Now, BBC boss Tim Davies says he can't see Hugh Edwards ever returning to the corporation after the disgraced presenter admitted to accessing indecent images of children. Speaking at the Royal Television Society conference, Davies called the former newsreader's actions appalling crimes that have damaged the BBC's reputation. He confirmed Edwards continued to receive £200,000 in salary until formal charges were made, but the BBC is now seeking to reclaim the money. He also says the victims' families remain the corporation's top priority. And in the US, an appeals court has upheld Ghislaine Maxwell's 2021 conviction for helping the disgraced late Jeffrey Epstein sexually abuse teenage girls. 62-year-old Maxwell has been serving a 20-year prison sentence after being convicted in 2021 on 5 charges for having recruited and groomed 4 underage girls. The 66-year-old financier died in a Manhattan jail cell in 2019. Those are your latest GB News headlines.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hi there. Staying dry virtually everywhere for the next 24 hours with widespread sunny skies, although some cloud will arrive overnight and that will stick around for some time through tomorrow. High pressure, though, firmly in charge of the weather at the moment, and that's keeping things settled. Weather fronts staying at bay in the Atlantic and cloud-free skies as we end the afternoon and go into the evening. The cloud across northern Scotland finally disappearing as well, the rain in Shetland easing off. But another area of cloud will head into East Anglia and then into parts of the Midlands, southern and southeastern England, as well as East Wales. A few mist patches under that cloud. A milder night, though, where that cloud persists, colder to the north and west, with temperatures in the mid to low single figures in some sheltered spots, and a few mist and fog patches forming across parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England. But for much of central and southern England, as well as Wales, it's partly cloudy as we begin things, and that cloud persists through the morning. Northern England tending to be cloud-free. Blue skies also across Northern Ireland and Scotland, away from any fog patches. The fog sticking around until mid-morning and then tending to disappear, with the sun returning widely across Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern and Western England, as well as West Wales. Across East Wales into the Midlands, the cloud will stick around until, say, early to mid-afternoon in places, and even then, for the east coast, there could be some lingering cloud through the day, but inland, plenty of sunshine and feeling warm in that sunshine with highs of 24, 25 Celsius across southern parts, and across northern Scotland as well, we'll see some warmth with highs of 22 or 23. Into the evening, we'll see further cloud arriving into the east and across central parts, and that becomes somewhat more extensive as we start off Thursday, and again slower to push back to the east coast. Otherwise, Thursday's a fine day, but Friday brings some showers to the south.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon. Hello to you. I'm Jules Buckley. Let's go to West Yorkshire. Firstly, in Battershaw, the Halifax Road there. The A6036 closed between Farfield Grove and the Meadway turn-off. A collision there being investigated, causing queues. Just need a Tesco. Southwest Wales, in Gwynedd, to Sam, the A496 closed near to Achgoch and queuing at the scene of a collision. Southend and Essex, the South Church Road westbound, the A13, blocked between Bellevue Avenue and Chase Road and slow going, is due to an earlier collision there. No issues this lunchtime around the turn-off of Southampton Docks. Junction 3, this one the M27 in Hampshire. Traffic being held both ways in queuing. There's a vehicle fire. And west on in Ilfracombe in Devon, the A361 by the Hidden Valley camping turn-off closed for a shed load there.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Your time is 3:38 and I'm Martin Daubney and this is GB News. Now, an astonishing story coming up here. The Liberal Democrats Party conference in Brighton has come to a close. I know, dry your eyes. Now, the leader, Sir Ed Davey, main focus has been on voters' priorities, the cost of living, tackling this sewage scandal and, above all, fixing the NHS and the care system. Now, this all comes as one Liberal Democrat councillor revealed that she claims to have been diagnosed with PTSD over Brexit. And Tony Harrison claims something had died in her after Britain left the European Union. Well, the rest of us are just dying with laughter. Let's speak now to our political editor, Chris Hope, who's at the conference there down in Brighton. Chris, I know we all like to have a bit of a dig about Remainers and Leavers. I miss talking about Brexit. You know that with all of my heart. But this takes Le Biscuit. To claim she's got PTSD over Brexit, Chris, is absurd. Tell us more.
Well, Martin, you're joining me here at the end of the Liberal Democrat conference. The yellow glitter ball has fired. Sir Ed Davey has finished an hour-long speech here to the faithful. They are delighted about the 72 seats they won at the election. A real focus here on the Tories. The Conservatives were mentioned around 22 times, Labour just 6 times in the speech. They clearly are turning their energy on cementing that win. They won 60 seats from the Tory party in that July 4th election. They have talked here in the speech, Sir Ed Davey, talking about the May local elections already, mentioning some Tory safe seats they want to win back from those councillors to try and cement this support for the Liberal Democrats. Sustained applause here on the Brexit issue. We heard Sir Ed Davey saying how he wants to get back into the single market, as he told me for GB News last night. He said that starts with freedom of movement for the under-30s across Europe. Long applause for that from the members here. Genuinely affecting moment. He talked about the care for his son John. We know he's big on care. He said, why was that not mentioned at all by the Labour Party in the King's speech or in the party's manifesto? He said that, like any parent of a child, he worries about who will care for his son John when he and his wife have gone. But yeah, a real passionate speech here from Sir Ed Davey. They're looking at places in Devon and Surrey to win next year, and also making very clear that they will oppose Labour when they have to, notably on the winter fuel payments, saying that should be restored, and also urging Sir Keir Starmer to be bolder about reform of the NHS, or rather putting money into the NHS, but of course, as we know, Labour are attaching concerns about how that money is spent before it is being spent. And also an intervention from Ed Davey, you may be interested to hear, Martin, in the US election coming up. He says that how he hopes and prays for Kamala Harris to defeat Donald Trump this winter. I'm joined now by Munira Wilson, the Lib Dem MP. Munira, thank you for joining us here for the party conference here at Lib Dem. It's wound up. How do you find that speech?
Well, it was full of hope and full of optimism, and really set out our work plan, I guess, as the 72 MPs, how we're going to hold this Labour government to account and, restore faith in British politics and stand up for British values. There's
no mention of Reform UK or Nigel Farage, and why should there be? He did talk, didn't he, about the Lib Dem values of those against populism and extremism. Is that who he was talking about?
Well, I suspect so. That's who I was thinking about. And let's face it, there are elements of the Conservative Party that lead in that direction as well.
Why did you mention the Tories 22 times and Labour 6 times? Shouldn't you be firing your energies at Labour?
Well, they've only just got into government a few weeks ago, so we need to give them a chance, but he's clearly laid out where they get things wrong, as they have done on, say, the winter fuel payment, we will oppose them, and where they do the right thing, we'll work with them to make sure that it's done properly.
And that's what constructive opposition means.
Absolutely, and that's our job, because frankly the Tories have gone missing in action the few weeks I've been in Parliament since the general election. Half the time they're just not turning up to do their job, and we're providing that opposition.
Sustained applause in the hall for the single market commitment. You're smiling away there, Munir, aren't you? And also free movement for the under-30s. Will it ever happen, though?
Well, we're pressing the Labour government to go there. Keir Starmer claims he wants to build a stronger relationship with Europe. Well, if that's what he means, then go ahead and do it, and we'll keep pressing him until he does.
And a genuinely affecting moment, he talked about the care for his son, John. Like any parent, he says, who will care for John when we're gone as parents? And I think that you could almost cut the atmosphere like a knife.
Yeah, it was a touching moment. You know, as a parent, it really touched me, and as it did for people who are parents or not parents, because, you know, it's the biggest responsibility, and it must be a real, you know, weight on his mind.
And Labour's silent on care, isn't it? In the King's speech and also the manifesto in July.
We've heard nothing from Wes Streeting or Keir Starmer on care, and that's a big priority for us, and we'll continue pressing them.
And he came on at the beginning to ABBA.
Yeah.
The last leader who I've seen come on to ABBA was Theresa May, and she wasn't very strong and still. Is that a hostage to fortune?
No, not at all. I think he showed how it's actually done, and he was dancing afterwards as well, both before and after. We're just showing that hope and joy and optimism amongst the doom and gloom we're getting from the Labour Party at the moment.
Yeah. Well, Munir Wilson, thank you for joining us today on GB News. So Munir Wilson there, optimistic. I think the sun has shone all day and all week in this conference, really, for Liberal Democrats, Martin, and they certainly feel that right now they can do no wrong. But we'll wait and see how they bring to bear that opposition against this Labour government in the coming weeks and months.
Yeah, Chris Hope, very good word, but you totally ignored my question about Antonia Harrison, the Lib Dem councillor who's got PTSD over Brexit. Talking about ABBA, gimme an answer on that question.
Well, yeah, she says that. I mean, I did talk about Brexit and why it matters to them. I mean, PTSD is a bit extreme. I didn't hear those comments, and of course she was maybe talking, not because PTSD is a serious thing for many people, but there's no question that they have a massive regret, Martin, about not being part of the European Union. And they clearly the way back for this party is this freedom of movement for under 30s, creeping back into the single market and making maybe the customs union longer term. I did ask, just for you, Martin, as you know, in the interview last night, when will this happen, Ed Davey? He wouldn't say, because basically he can't.
Yeah, and Chris Hope, I reckon they're not having a go at the Labour Party because they secretly hope the Labour Party will do their bidding for them to try and rejoin. Chris Hope, legend, always a pleasure. Live there from the Lib Dem conference in Brighton. Always a pleasure. Cheers. Now, moving on, it's time for the Great British Giveaway and your chance to win the equivalent of having an extra £3,000 in your bank account each month for an entire year. A whopping £36,000, totally tax-free cash. And here's all the details that you need for a chance to make it yours.
Good luck.
Now, here's one for you. Have you ever wondered why you can't get a GP appointment? Well, a new study has found out that Workshy family doctors work a mere 26 hours on a week average. An astonishing confession. Where are all the doctors? I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Business News Channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Prince Harry has got in touch with a lot of people surrounding the royals about a possible return, some sort of easing himself back into what goes on in this country, and tries to repair his image. This has been reported today in the Daily Mail.
Yeah, the major move is being branded as Operation Bring Harry In from the Cold, as he's allegedly growing dissatisfied with advice from American-based image experts.
Let's now speak to Jack Stooks. Now, Jack is a former gardener, senior gardener, top man at Highgrove there. And did you know Harry, Jack?
Yes, yeah, I did. The Harry I knew was always amazing, really good, lovely to be around. I think everybody wanted to be around him, really. He was the sort of life and soul of the family. What we've got to remember is at the time, we knew a book was coming out. We knew various things might come from that. We knew that there was problems with Meghan's family, and there was a lot going on at the time. I think things have, sort of been brushed aside to an extent. Whether or not the book was a mistake, I mean, he might think it was a mistake. He might not think it was a mistake. What we tend to do is we judge him on just the fact that he wrote the book. What we don't think is, why did he write the book? We don't ask the questions as to there was a reason behind him having to have his story known. And maybe, he needed that. Maybe he felt he just needed people to know his side of the story. Hopefully, that family can forgive. I mean, not forget, but be able to sort of move on in a different way.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun. No, he didn't say that, Dave. I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 10 to 4. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, have you ever wondered why you can't get a GP appointment? Might it be soaring immigration or perhaps ballooning waiting lists? Or is it because NHS budgets have been cut? Well, brace yourselves, because a shock new analysis of NHS data shows GPs work on average of just 26 hours per week, and that's down from 30 hours a week in 2016. Now, the report adds doctors are unwilling or unable to go to work for any longer. Do these work-shy quacks need doctors' orders to get back to work sharpish? Well, let's bring in now the voice of one of GB Voice's viewers, and that's William Pickup. William, welcome to the show. So I heard you had a very, very lengthy struggle to get to see your quack. Tell us your story.
Yes, well, before COVID, it was fine. We got there in a few days. But now, for the last couple of years, it's been more like 3 weeks. Now, I think if you have an emergency, they might be able to get you in within a day or two. But generally, 3 weeks is the minimum before you can have a routine appointment. And I had one over COVID. They diagnosed I needed an operation reasonably quickly. I waited a year, didn't hear anything, and thought, well, I'll cut them some slack here because it is COVID, obviously a crisis. And I phoned them up after a year and said, what's happened? And they said, we forgot to refer you.
Just an astonishing thing to say. And when you find out, and I believe you ended up in A&E, didn't you, William? So you ended up in A&E, you went to hospital to try and get seen in the end, to try and short-circuit the GP system. But when you find out the information from this report today from the University of Manchester, and do you know, by the way, that doctors are actually contracted to work 37.5 hours a week? They're putting in 26 hours a week. They're missing in action for almost a third of their entire contracted hours. William Pickup, how does that make you feel?
Well, I think that one of the big problems is that a lot of doctors have now gone part-time. Under New Labour, I know they gave them a massive pay increase, almost double. And many doctors said, well, we're going to go down to 3 days a week. We've got a big gender mix now, which is fine. You've got a lot more women doctors, but of course, a lot more women doctors actually only want to work part-time as well, and that's fine as well. But it means patients suffer, and what happens is, I've been to A&E 3 times in the last 2 years. It's been absolutely catastrophically bad, waiting of up to 15 hours overnight, getting misdiagnoses, getting no diagnosis, being kicked out again. when there's serious problems. And that's caused by the fact that GPs are not available within a couple of days for what patients think might be quite difficult problems.
It's an astonishing state of affairs, and the report goes on to admit that GPs may be working less because they are likely to be unwilling or unable to face more of the intense day-to-day pressures. You know, the job of being a doctor. Isn't that the job of being a doctor? You sign up for this, you get well paid for it. I just find it incredible that we seem to be having doctors who are missing in action. By the way, William, you are absolutely correct to say that women, typically GPs, work fewer hours than men. That's not a sexist thing to say. It's absolutely true. This data backs it up. Thank you so much for joining us there from Glossop, Derbyshire, understand, a place I know well. William Pickup, thank you very much. A wonderful GB News viewer. Thanks for joining us on the show. Now, I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, as you probably know, Britain's news channel. More to come in the next couple of hours, including the exclusive story on the Rotherham grooming gang silenced by our judges. I'll be joined by Rupert Lowe from Reform. Now, it's your weather.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there. Staying dry virtually everywhere for the next 24 hours with widespread sunny skies, although some cloud will arrive overnight and that will stick around for some time through tomorrow. High pressure, though, firmly in charge of the weather at the moment, and that's keeping things settled. Weather fronts staying at bay in the Atlantic, and cloud-free skies as we end the afternoon and go into the evening. The cloud across northern Scotland finally disappearing as well, the rain in Shetland easing off. But another area of cloud will head into East Anglia and then into parts of the Midlands, southern and southeastern England, as well as East Wales. A few mist patches under that cloud. A milder night, though, where that cloud persists, colder to the north and west, with temperatures in the mid to low single figures in some sheltered spots, and a few mist and fog patches forming across parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England. But for much of central and southern England, as well as Wales, it's partly cloudy as we begin things, and that cloud persists through the morning. Northern England tending to be cloud-free. Blue skies also across Northern Ireland and Scotland, away from any fog patches. The fog sticking around until mid-morning and then tending to disappear, with the sun returning widely across Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern and Western England, as well as West Wales. Across East Wales into the Midlands, the cloud will stick around until, say, early to mid-afternoon in places, and even then, for the east coast, there could be some lingering cloud through the day, but inland, plenty of sunshine and feeling warm in that sunshine with highs of 24, 25 Celsius across southern parts. And across northern Scotland as well, we'll see some warmth with highs of 22 or 23. Into the evening, we'll see further cloud arriving into the east and across central parts, and that becomes somewhat more extensive as we start off Thursday, and again slower to push back to the east coast. Otherwise, Thursday's a fine day, but Friday brings some showers to the south.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News. The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon. Hello again to you. I'm Jules Buckley. Let's go to North Yorkshire. Firstly, the northbound A1M, Ripon Junction 50 up towards Bedale at 51. The two lanes are coned off there. An overturned vehicle, a collision there causing big queues. Flint Mountain in Flintshire, North East Wales, the North Up Road, the A5119, shut between Lonna Plas and Penfra Hill and queuing. That's due to a collision as well. All the traffic's been held on the westbound M4 around Swindon, Junction 15 to 16, queuing on the approach at the scene of a multi-vehicle collision. Anti-clock M25 struggling at the Darenth interchange at Junction 2. Lane 1's coned off. There's a breakdown causing queues. And there's a vehicle fire still being dealt with on the eastbound M27. All lanes open, but still queuing towards Southampton Docks there. The turn off at Junction 3. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
This is your chance to...
Tune in to Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. GB News royalty with your perfect start to the weekend. Lucky us! Feisty and fearless guests.
Well, I'm a normal person, so ask me.
Honest opinions that raises more questions than a Gary Barlow tax return. And a few surprises along the way.
Might be cold in this studio.
That is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. 8 to 9 only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
A very good afternoon to you. It's 4 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News. We're broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster, all across the UK. On today's show, after GB News exclusively learned that a Rotherham grooming gang survivor was denied the opportunity to demand her abuser be deported back to Pakistan, today we're asking, is it time to deport all 10,000 foreign criminals in British jails to help ease those overcrowded prisons? Next up, a Liberal Democrat councillor has claimed that she has a diagnosis of PTSD over Brexit. Comparing herself to a fighter in Sudan, she added, "Brexit has had a profound impact on me. Is she the Ramona of the century?" Next up, Tory leadership frontrunner Kemi Badenoch has sat down for an emotional interview with GB News' political editor Chris Hope. In that exclusive interview, she reveals how the death of her father inspired her to stand for the Tory leadership, but warns, "I won't work with Nigel Farage." Next up, a shock new analysis of NHS data shows that GPs work an average of just 26 hours per week, and that's down from 30 hours in 2016. The report adds that doctors are either unwilling or unable to work any longer. Do these work-shy quacks need doctors' orders to work those longer hours? And that's all coming in your next hour. Welcome to the show. Always a pleasure to have your company. Big question today. Is it time to deport foreign-born criminals from British jails? This follows the GB News exclusive from Charlie Peters. An incredible impact victim statement was censored by a judge at Sheffield Crown Court on Friday. The victim, who'd been abused sexually by over 150 men from the age of 11, was denied her opportunity to read out in court that she wanted her rapist, the paedophile, to be deported to Pakistan, where he was born. She was denied that opportunity. It's created a huge political furore. Robert Jenrick has got involved. Lee Anderson. Shortly, I'll be joined by Rupert Lowe, the MP for the Reform Party for Great Yarmouth. Get in touch with your views. What do you think about this? Is it time to put the foot down? No more soft touch Britain. GBnews.com/your say. That's your way to get in touch. But now it's time for your headlines, and here's Sophia Wensler.
Martin, thank you. It's just gone 4 o'clock. These are your headlines. First, to the Middle East, where we're hearing reports that more than 1,000 people have been injured, including members of the Hezbollah terrorist group, when their communication pages exploded. You can see here footage appearing to show the moment one of the devices exploded. It's being described as the biggest security breach so far in nearly a year of conflict with Israel. A journalist for the Reuters news agency reported seeing ambulances rushing through Beirut's southern suburbs amid widespread panic, with explosions continuing for 30 minutes after the initial blasts. At this stage, there's been no comment from the Israeli military. Now, back in the UK, the government says it is tackling small boat crossings on all fronts, following news that 10,000 people have crossed the channel in small boats since Labour came to power in July. Home Office figures show 65 more migrants arrived on Monday, bringing the year's total to nearly 23,600, though that's down 1% from this time last year. The latest crossings follow the deaths of 8 migrants over the weekend as the government boosts funding for border security. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper's announced £75 million for more officers, cameras and technology to combat people smuggling. Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer says he's also looking at Italy's immigration policies for possible solutions. Meanwhile, the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, says the end of a pay dispute with junior doctors marks a first step in the government's mission to reform the broken health service. Members of the British Medical Association have voted to accept the government's offer of a 22% pay rise over 2 years. However, the Conservatives are warning the government not to set a precedent by awarding striking workers with what they've described as bumper pay rises. This morning, Deputy Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Daisy Cooper, told us her party still think more can be done.
Part of the answer is pay, but as I say, it's just a first step. What we Liberal Democrats want to see is a really ambitious budget in October. We want the Labour government to use the budget to be a budget to save our NHS and care services. And as part of that, we want to see an increase in day-to-day spending, not by taxing struggling families, but by reversing the tax cuts for the big banks and closing the loopholes in capital gains tax so the wealthiest pay a little bit more. But we also want to see borrowing to repair our crumbling hospitals and GP surgeries too.
Now, in other news, BBC boss Tim Davie says he can't see Hugh Edwards ever returning to the corporation after the disgraced presenter admitted to accessing indecent images of children. Speaking at the Royal Television Society conference, Davie called the former newsreader's actions appalling crimes that have damaged the BBC's reputation. He confirmed Edwards continued to receive £200,000 in salary until formal charges were made, but the BBC is now seeking to reclaim that money. He also says the victims' families remain the corporation's top priority. Now, in the US, Donald Trump has spoken publicly for the first time since being targeted in an apparent assassination attempt on his Florida golf course. Speaking in a live stream on social media, the former president described being grabbed by Secret Service agents after 4 or 5 gunshots rang out. 58-year-old Ryan Ralph is facing federal gun charges after a Secret Service agent spotted a rifle poking through the bushes and opened fire on the suspect. Mr. Trump's also praised his protection team and, in a rare show of political unity, commended President Joe Biden for calling him.
I was with an agent, and the agent did a fantastic job. There was no question that we were off that course. I would have loved to have sank that last putt, but we decided, well, let's get out of here. We do need more people on my detail because we have 50, 60,000 people showing up to events, and other people don't have that.
And finally, Glasgow will host the Commonwealth Games in 2026 over the Scottish Government agreed to back a scaled-down version of the event. The city last hosted the international sporting event in 2014 and has now stepped in again after the planned hosts for 2026 backed out. The state of Victoria withdrew, citing a rise in estimated costs, but has pledged a multi-million-pound investment if Scotland were to take over. Due to a lack of time and funding, some sports will have to be dropped from the multi-event games. Those are your latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Martin.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sophia. Now on to a GB News exclusive. A Rotherham sexual exploitation survivor was ordered to remove a demand for her abuser to be deported, GB News can reveal. The woman gave a moving statement in Sheffield Crown Court last week, over 20 years after she was groomed and abused from the age of just 11 by the Pakistani heritage men. But the judge made her remove any reference to deporting her offenders. So today I'm asking, should we deport foreign criminals, especially the perpetrators of grooming gang crimes? And joining us in the studio is the man who gave us that exclusive story, our national reporter, Charlie Peters. Charlie, I just want to say again, well done. You went to that court in Sheffield last week. You were the only national reporter who bothered to show up to listen to these girls who waited years and years and years for their moment. And then to learn they were denied the full moment because their statement was censored. It's an astonishing story. Why did they censor her words?
Well, just before that survivor came into the courtroom to stand in the witness stand to be next to the judge and speak directly to those 7 defendants in the dock ahead of their sentencing, to tell them they'd lost They'd taken her childhood, they'd taken her innocence, but she said, I'm a survivor, I'm a fighter, I am your karma, I'm now taking your freedom. As she prepared to do that, before she came into the room, the CPS barrister spoke with the judge and said that any discussion about whether or not they, the abusers, remain in this country is for the Home Office, not this court. Now, I heard that being discussed, and I made a small note of it. And after the extremely emotional and powerful delivery from that survivor towards those defendants was delivered, she passed me the full details of her victim impact statement, which included the line, I'd like to request that 2 of the defendants are deported after they serve their sentence. They arrive in this country to exploit children. She wants them to go back. She was not permitted to say that. Her closing in the courtroom was extremely powerful, as I said, very emotional, very well delivered. The defendants looked anywhere but towards her. At one point, I had a short moment of eye contact with one of the defendants as he looked anywhere but towards the witness box. But the real conclusion she wanted to deliver was to demand that 2 of those men, who she says are Pakistani-born, they're still Pakistani nationals, should be deported. That demand comes as many other grooming gang abusers have not been deported by the Home Office. In another notorious case in Rochdale, a man who was described as a ringleader of an appalling abuse gang there called Kari Ralph, a decade after his sentencing, has still not been deported. He's still living in the community, and hundreds of thousands of pounds of legal aid has been spent on him fighting his deportation case. But in this case, in Sheffield Crown Court last week, the sentencing was handed down. Some of the most severe sentences I've seen in my records for grooming gang abusers. One of 24 years, another of 25 years. They were described as cunning and evil sexual predators. But the opportunity for the survivor to say, get them out of Britain, was not permitted.
Charlie Peters, stick with us. We'll come back to you in a moment. But I'm now joined by the Reform UK MP for Great Yarmouth, Rupert Lowe, who joins me. Rupert, welcome to the show. This is an astonishing story. Charlie Peters also told me in the last hour that with his investigation, not a single grooming gang, foreign-born national, has been deported from the United Kingdom throughout all of the years of these terrible, terrible cases coming to light. There's been a huge political outpouring in reaction to what we've discovered here at GBNews. Rupert Lowe, I know you were very passionate earlier. You feel that the system, it sticks up for the perpetrators and not the survivors. How can this be right?
Well, it does always seem that way, Martin. Thank you for having me on your show. It's nice to see a fellow West Midlands Brexit Party MEP. Yeah, it seems that way. It seems that the system is skewed towards protecting those people who perpetrate crime rather than suffer it. And I think it's quite extraordinary that the judge in this case redacted the line which the victim wanted to put in about deporting her sort of the miscreant offenders. I think it's another example of a two-tier judiciary, which effectively is in line with the two-tier policing that we've seen. And do you know what, Martin? I actually think it's indicative that the establishment can see the post-war plan for a multicultural society is gradually failing. I think the British people can see that, possibly with the exception of London, which I think is almost a lost cause. But I think the rest of the country is still very sound, and quite rightly, they have grave concerns about it. So I think it's extraordinary that the judge should have intervened in that way. And as you know, earlier today I put out a tweet. I mean, there are something over 10,000 foreign criminals languishing in our prisons. And I think if people come here and they commit crime, they should be sent home. And if they've got dependents who are relying on their presence here, the dependents should be sent home as well. I really don't see why British pensioners should suffer and pay for these people when ultimately many of them are going to freeze this winter. It's quite extraordinary, Martin.
Rupert Lowe, the figures are astonishing. As you say, it's around about 10,300, including almost 1,500 Albanians, 856 Polish, 758 Romanians. The list goes on and on and on, and none of them have been deported of that 10,000. Rupert, I'm joined in the studio by Charlie Peters, who broke this exclusive story. He'd like to ask you a question now.
Rupert, you've seen the reaction, I'm sure, from lots of Conservative MPs to this story on the judge, removing that line from the victim impact statement. Neil O'Brien, Suella Braverman and Robert Jenrick saying this is a disgrace and that victims will not be silenced. What's been your reaction to those statements from the Conservatives? And do you feel as though the Conservatives have done enough to support justice for grooming gang victims?
Well, of course not. No, I mean, the Conservatives had an 80-seat majority and they squandered it. So I think it's pretty dangerous for them to start throwing stones. They say people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. Well, they've had a chance to put this right and they've failed. I don't necessarily blame Suella Braverman or Robert Jenrick as such, but I think they shouldn't necessarily be saying or criticising when they had an opportunity to correct this. I think they failed to do that, and therefore they're highlighting that failure by commenting on this situation. Reform, we would be very strong on this. We're quite clear that it's the victims who should be protected. It's the people who suffer from crime, who are honest, decent members of society. The law should be there to protect them, not the miscreant.
And Rupert, we've had a reaction from the Home Office last night. A spokesperson very briefly told me that it wouldn't comment on individual cases. But I've not heard at all from any Labour MPs. Why do you think there's been such a mood of silence from them and indeed the rest of the broadcast media on this issue today?
I honestly don't know, but I'm having trouble myself getting information out of various government departments. And I'm an MP, I can actually ask questions. And they're very reluctant to often answer those questions which they think might be in any way sensitive. And you know what? That's not the way that an honest democracy should operate. People should have access transparently to information. Government departments should collect it and they should disseminate it in an honest way so that people can actually see what's going on in their society, which ultimately the taxpayer is paying for. So I think there is room for huge improvement in the way in which government is transparent about figures for all sorts of issues which are now of great concern to the British people.
Rupert, could I quickly ask for your opinion on a separate matter, and that is the ongoing scandal of the donations to the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, and his wife, receiving lots of suits and frocks and spectacles, and asking for this because, of course, you famously donate your entire political salary to charity. So I think you're well placed to comment. What do you think about the idea that Sir Keir Starmer promised to clean up politics, get rid of the sleaze, no more cronyism, no more freebies, and yet here we are, seems like Groundhog Day?
Well, I think I can comment on this one, Martin, without being accused of throwing stones in a glass house. Yes, I'm giving my parliamentary salary, my net parliamentary salary, to local Great Yarmouth charities because I'm in this not for money. I'm in this ultimately to vocationally change the way in which we're governed. I would never trust a bought man, Martin, and I think by accepting gifts or money or, allowing people to buy dresses for your wife or spend their money on designer sunglasses or new suits for you, frankly, I find it mystifying, and I would also actually be ashamed if I let somebody else buy my wife's clothes for her, particularly if I was as rich as Keir Starmer. So, he is a bought man. It worries me greatly. As I said earlier on another TV interview, I would rather be represented by somebody who shows me what they are rather than tries to be something that they're not. And it's disappointing to see that, our Prime Minister is not only falling into this trap, but also, I think in this case, failing to disclose correctly to the parliamentary forces that be.
OK, well, thanks for joining us, then. That's the Reform UK MP for Great Yarmouth, Rupert Lowe. Of course, Sir Keir Starmer denies he's broken any rules, but thank you for joining us on the show this afternoon. Thank you very much. Now, I'll have lots more on that story, of course, at 5 o'clock. And there's plenty of coverage on our website, gbnews.com, and you've helped to make it the fastest-growing national news website in the country. So thank you very much. And thank you to Charlie Peters for that story. Now, moving on. It's time for the Great British Giveaway now, and your chance to win the equivalent of having an extra £3,000 in your bank account each month for the next year. A whopping 36 grand in tax-free moolah. Here's all the details that you need for your chance to make it yours.
This is your chance to...
Good luck. Now, hundreds of Hezbollah members have been wounded when their pagers exploded. More on that extraordinary story next with Mark White. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
With her novels Persuasion and Northanger Abbey both set in Bath, the city has taken to honouring their author each year with the Jane Austen Festival. Over 3,500 Austen fans flock to the city, many in their Regency finery and many coming from abroad. You can join the throng and follow the author along streets whose buildings look much the same as when she strolled past them over 200 years ago. Dating back to 2001, the festival is the world's largest and longest-running celebration of the Romance writer. Originally created by the Jane Austen Centre in Bath and running over the course of one weekend, 23 years on, it's grown into a 10-day festival with more than 80 events. And to tell us more, I'm delighted to be joined now by author and broadcaster Jenny Trent-Hughes. Jenny, let's have a look at you. You look absolutely splendid. Well, welcome to GB News. Tell me a little bit about what you're wearing.
I'm wearing, well, usually I have a character called the Queen of All Hearts, and I have a fantastic outfit designed by Bath Theatrical. I was on the way up to you this morning. I was so excited I was going to meet you finally, and because of the trains, I didn't get to come. So I had to run back to my boat. I live on a boat, which is why the background is a bit odd, and I'm in a Regency outfit.
Well, look, I'm absolutely delighted that you have put the outfit on for us, because also someone was bringing a dress to you and her train was cancelled as well. So dressing up is obviously a big part of it. Have you any idea how many people dress up in order to participate?
Quite a few thousand.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back. Your time is 4:23. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, an incredible story here, because more than 1,000 people, including members of the terrorist group Hezbollah, as well as fighters and medics, have been seriously injured when pagers that they used to communicate exploded. The Iranian ambassador to Lebanon is also reportedly injured. It's been described as the biggest security breach the group has been subjected to in nearly a year of war with Israel. And the Israeli military are yet to comment. And we're joined now by our Homeland Security editor, Mark White. Mark, it's an incredible story, something out of an episode of Homeland. Bring us up to speed.
Yes, indeed. We can bring you some live images, actually, from southern Beirut, the Lebanese capital, where there are lots of medics there. There have been, over the past hour and a half, 2 hours, many hundreds of injured people being brought to the hospital, many of those, we believe, Hezbollah terrorists. And we can exclusively reveal as well a line from security sources who've told us that many of the injuries suffered by these terrorists were suffered when they received a message on their pager, then picked up the pager to take a look at that message, and the pagers exploded at that point. And that would explain why in a lot of the video that we'll show you in a bit, not quite yet, but a lot of the video that I've seen, there are injuries to hands blown off, injuries to the face as well. So it appears that a message was sent on the paging system, that many of those who answered that paging message, brought the pager up to have a look at the message, were then seriously injured. And indeed, there are reports of deaths as well. And those who didn't answer the message, their pagers exploded while they were still attached to their waist or whatever, so they suffered injuries to their lower extremities. It is, Martin, the most extraordinary story. We can bring you some more video. This is showing the moment of detonation in a couple of these people wearing the pagers still on their lower parts of their body. You'll see a puff of smoke. There you go. That's clearly quite a powerful blast. The individuals wearing that running away, no doubt for hospital treatment. Another person here. Again, the pager goes off and they fall to the ground there. You can see the explosion at that fruit market. And then we were talking about the hospital images inside. We're not showing you the worst of the injuries, but you can see the scenes of absolute chaos as person after person is brought through the emergency doors of this, one of the main hospitals in Beirut. They are talking, Martin, of at least 1,000 people wounded in what seems to be the most extraordinary operation. The fingers have got to point towards the Israeli intelligence services, but as you said in your introduction there, no word yet from the Israeli authorities, and I think it's likely that they will maintain that never confirming nor denying approach to these particular issues.
And yet, Mark White, clearly orchestrated, meticulously planned. Hezbollah, of course, using pager technology because it's harder to trace, but they've been replaced clearly by a range of explosive devices in an orchestrated, simultaneous, it seems, series of explosions. It's an incredibly interconnected and detailed heist. And Mark, of course, Hezbollah renowned as being incredibly secretive and fragmented, so the security breach as well as the physical impact, simply extraordinary.
Yeah, you make some really good points there. And on this issue of the just recently, a few months ago, the Hezbollah leader, Hassan Nasrallah, told his fellow terrorists not to use their smartphones for fears that the Israeli military and intelligence services were able to access that, monitor their activities, and effectively to go old school, to get back to pagers. Now, we understand again from a number of security sources, this time being quoted by the Reuters news agency, quoting 3 separate intelligence sources, saying that the pagers that exploded were all new model pagers provided to Hezbollah within the last few months. So go figure. It seems that these pagers at some point were adapted, high explosives put inside these pagers, and then they were put out to market, found their way to Hezbollah, probably through third parties that are closely aligned, if not right in Hezbollah itself. An audacious operation. As I say, the Israelis probably unlikely to confirm that their hand was at play here, but there's no doubt the ramifications potentially could be significant as well when we consider that, again, this is being reported by an Iranian news agency that the Iranian ambassador to Lebanon was one of those injured when his pager detonated. Key question that I would like answered there is, why was the ambassador of Iran carrying a terrorist pager?
That's a big question. And we're just hearing of a line here, Mark White, 3 now confirmed dead by these extraordinary exploding pages, and now there'll be a hugely embarrassing as well as effective and targeted attack for Hezbollah, a major security breach, and of course now we're trying to start their own investigation. Who supplied these? What was their motive? A massive investigation will be going on into what you say, Mark White, is an audacious and extraordinary attack.
Yes, there's no doubt about that. Hezbollah will be looking at their own, knowing that one of their own, or more than one of their own, were involved in the operation to get these pagers disseminated throughout the Hezbollah terrorist network. As I say, if we're talking over 1,000 injured, it's unlikely that those in the surrounding environs would have been injured, so it would have probably been those directly in contact with the pager, i.e. those wearing and viewing any messages received on the pagers themselves. So that's an awful lot of pagers to get into the system, as someone clearly at some point orchestrated, suggested to Hezbollah senior commanders that this was the way to go, that they could get their hands on however many at knockdown prices, and this incredible security breach has then occurred, with Hezbollah clearly going ahead and doing that. But I think to go back to the point with the Iranian ambassador, because clearly this is an Iranian official of senior standing, an ambassador, injured, and we don't know yet how badly injured in this incident. It does escalate the situation, there is no doubt. We were expecting weeks ago a very significant missile attack from both Iran and Hezbollah, following, of course, you'll remember the assassinations that took place inside Iran of senior Hezbollah officials and a Hamas official inside Iran as well, and one that took place in Lebanon too. They have not happened, but people have been very concerned about the potential for that. This just ups the ante again on what is a very, very precarious situation out there in the Middle East.
3 confirmed dead so far, 1,000 injured. And as you say, Mark White, fascinating now to see who has been injured, which will tell us, I guess, how far the tendrils of Hezbollah spread, who is in direct contact. Mark will have much more on that story at the top of the 5 o'clock. Hope you can bring us some more news and fantastic story. Thank you very much, Mark White. Wow, what a story. Now, there's lots more still to come between now and 5 o'clock, including Tory leadership frontrunner Kemi Badenoch sat down in an emotional exclusive interview with GB News' political editor Chris Hope. But first, here's your headlines, and here's Sophia Wensler.
Martin, thank you. Good afternoon. It's just gone 4:30. These are your headlines. First, to the Middle East, where we're hearing reports that 3 people have been killed and more than 1,000 people have been injured, including members of the Hezbollah terrorist group, when their communication pages exploded. You can see here footage appearing to show the moment when one of the devices exploded. It's being described as the biggest security breach so far in nearly a year of conflict with Israel. A journalist for the Reuters news agency reported seeing ambulances rushing through Beirut's southern suburbs amid widespread panic, with explosions continuing for 30 minutes after the initial blasts. At this stage, there's been no comment from the Israeli military. Now, back in the UK, the government says it's tackling small boat crossings on all fronts, following news that 10,000 people have crossed the channel in small boats since Labour came to power in July. Home Office figures show 65 more migrants arrived on Monday, bringing the year's total to nearly 23,600, though that's down 1% from this time last year. The latest crossings follow the deaths of 8 migrants over the weekend as the government boosts funding for border security. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper has announced £75 million for more officers, cameras and technology to combat people smuggling. Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer says he's also looking at Italy's immigration policies for possible solutions. Meanwhile, Health Secretary Wes Streeting says the end of a pay dispute with junior doctors marks the first step in the government's mission to reform the broken health service. Members of the British Medical Association have voted to accept the government's offer of a 22% pay rise over 2 years. However, the Conservatives are warning the government not to set a precedent by awarding striking workers with what they've described as bumper pay rises. This morning, Deputy Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Daisy Cooper, told us her party still think more can be done.
Part of the answer is pay, but as I say, it's just a first step. What we Liberal Democrats want to see is a really ambitious budget in October. We want the Labour government to use the budget to be a budget to save our NHS and care services. And as part of that, we want to see an increase in day-to-day spending, not by taxing struggling families, but by reversing the tax cuts for the big banks and closing the loopholes in capital gains tax so the wealthiest pay a little bit more. But we also want to see borrowing to repair our crumbling hospitals and GP surgeries too.
Now, in the US, the rapper Sean Combs, also known as P. Diddy, has been charged with 3 federal charges, including racketeering, sex trafficking and transportation to engage in prostitution. That's according to an indictment which was unsealed today. The 54-year-old music mogul is under investigation after a number of women came forward. Combs has denied all claims and his team insists he's innocent and ready to clear his name in court. Those are your latest GB News headlines for now. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hi there. Staying dry virtually everywhere for the next 24 hours with widespread sunny skies, although some cloud will arrive overnight and that will stick around for some time through tomorrow. High pressure, though, firmly in charge of the weather at the moment, and that's keeping things settled. Weather fronts staying at bay in the Atlantic and cloud-free skies as we end the afternoon and go into the evening. The cloud across northern Scotland finally disappearing as well, the rain in Shetland easing off. But another area of cloud will head into East Anglia and then into parts of the Midlands, southern and southeastern England, as well as East Wales. A few mist patches under that cloud. A milder night, though, where that cloud persists, colder to the north and west, with temperatures in the mid to low single figures in some sheltered spots, and a few mist and fog patches forming across parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England. But for much of central and southern England, as well as Wales, it's partly cloudy as we begin things, and that cloud persists through the morning. Northern England tending to be cloud-free. Blue skies also across Northern Ireland and Scotland, away from any fog patches. The fog sticking around until mid-morning and then tending to disappear, with the sun returning widely across Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern and Western England, as well as West Wales. Across East Wales into the Midlands, the cloud will stick around until, say, early to mid-afternoon in places, and even then, for the east coast, there could be some lingering cloud through the day, but inland, plenty of sunshine and feeling warm in that sunshine with highs of 24, 25 Celsius across southern parts. And across northern Scotland as well, we'll see some warmth with highs of 22 or 23. Into the evening, we'll see further cloud arriving into the east and across central parts, and that becomes somewhat more extensive as we start off Thursday, and again slower to push back to the east coast. Otherwise, Thursday's a fine day, but Friday brings some showers to the south.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, hello to you, I'm Jules Buckley. The northbound A1M is still struggling, 2-lane shut between Ripon and Bedale Junction 50 to 51. An Overton vehicle there still causing big queues. Westbound M4 in Berkshire at the turn-off Junction 6 for Slough and Windsor, still queuing a lane shut there at the scene of an earlier accident. There's been a bump to clockwise M25, so struggling Enfield 25 to Waltham Abbey 26. All the lanes are back open though. Anti-clock M25 at Darenth Junction 2, there's a breakdown, a lane shut and slow going. Essex, the northbound M11's part blocked, 8 Bishop Stortford to Saffron Walden at 9. A collision there means it's queuing, as is the eastbound M27, still a lane close towards the M271, the Southampton Docks turn off Junction 3. That follows an earlier vehicle fire there.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Your time is 4:39. I'm Martin Daubney, and this is GB News. Now, in a GB News exclusive, our very own Christopher Hope sat down with Tory leadership hopeful Kemi Badenoch on his political podcast, Chopper's Pod. Let's take a little listen.
Probably the most significant thing, which I don't often talk about, is that my dad died right at the beginning of 2022. And to me, that was the worst possible thing that could happen in my life. My dad is one of my heroes still is, even though he's no longer around. And I often found that when I was telling stories and anecdotes, it'd be, well, my dad showed me how to do this, or my dad taught me that, and my dad said this, and so on. And it felt like the foundation had been pulled away from under me. But it also meant that I became less risk averse. I would never, ever, in January 2022, just before he died, if someone had said, you're going to be running for leader in 6 months' time, I would have said, that's completely crazy. That's potty. Why would I want to do that? We have a great prime minister in Boris. Why would anyone want to do that? And then when all of the stuff happened that led to Boris leaving, I looked at the people who were going forwards, and two of them had actually been my secretaries of state, Liz and Rishi, and I'd worked with them very closely. And I thought, I don't think that either of this will work.
Superb exclusive there, and we are now joined by the man himself, GB News' political editor, Chris Hope. Chris, welcome back to the show, live there from Brighton. Of course, you're at the Lib Dem closing day of their conference. So, with Kemi Badenoch, that's now 6 out of 6 of the Tory leadership hopefuls that you interviewed. An expansive and at times very touching interview, Chris. Tell us more.
That's right, Kemi Badenoch spoke to us. She's the last one we've interviewed for our series of 6 interviews for Chopper's political podcast. I thought she was quite touched. I mean, she lifted the lid on the idea that she's a bit impatient. She doesn't suffer fools gladly. Well, she says, well, why should she? She wants to get on with governing. She made clear that when her dad died, that almost took the brakes off her, and she thought, I'll stand. And she became a very creditable, I think third it was, or fourth, forgive me, back in 2022. And now she's going for the top job. She wouldn't go as far as Robert Jenrick in other areas. She wouldn't say she would cap legal migration only a few thousand, as Jenrick told us, but she would leave the ECHR to control illegal migration if it came to that. And she called supporters of her party who went to Reform UK, my people. There are people, we can get them back. And I think that shows a real intent to draw back those supporters from Reform UK. These 4 of them now go forward. James Cleverly, Robert Jenrick, Tom Tugendhat, Kemi Badenoch go forward to the party conference when they'll be grilled by party members, and then just 2 go forward finally to the final 2, and maybe some hustings and the like for a final choice on November the 2nd. Until then, well, it's the Liberal Democrats who are making the running, if that's what you call it, in opposing this government, because just in the speech that's given now by Ed Davey, he attacked the Tories 22 times and Labour just 6 times. So frankly, I think the Tories need to get on with it and find an opponent, a leader of their party, to oppose the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer. But I've heard from Kemi Badenoch. I think she was impressive. She says she's an engineer. She thinks engineers are good at constructing a government, a team, an opposition to this Labour government in a way which maybe journalists aren't, and frankly many might agree with her after the kind of chaos of Boris Johnson's time in office.
And Chris Hope, Kemi Badenoch also with very strong words about the fact, she said, it's not racist to be worried about immigration, a sentiment obviously we hear a lot from our viewers. And she also talks about why in particular she felt that the Liberal left have turned their guns on her. Tell us more about that.
That's right. I mean, she says to me that she thinks she physically and personally is a repudiation of everything which the left believe someone like Kemi Badenoch should be. Not being a victim, she's not a victim, but she says the left want, a person like Kemi Badenoch to be a victim and to be protesting about how she's treated in Britain. In fact, she says that's not the case with me, and that annoys them, and that's why I think she feels she can get under the skin of the left, because she is happily talking about her background, where she comes from, what she stands for. She's not willing to be someone who's a victim of maybe white oppression or whatever it might be, and I think that really gets under the skin. She also, on the issue of immigration, she talked about Lee Anderson, and she said it was a mistake by the last Tory whips to try and to force him to apologise for remarks he made. If you remember about the Sadiq Khan, the London mayor, she said that there must be a better way to deal with people who make comments which may be out of kilter with some people in leadership, but equally he's still a Conservative. And on Nigel Farage, I said, is he a Tory? And she said no, Farage is not a Tory.
And of course, those comments that Lee Anderson made were made right here on this show. Seems to be quite a bit of controversy on this show. Chris Hope, excellent interview with Kemi Badenoch. Of course, you can listen to Chris Hope's interview with Kemi on Chopper's Political Podcast, on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, or you can watch it, of course, on GB News' YouTube channel. Now, if you ever wondered why you can't get a GP appointment, well, a new study found that family doctors are working an astonishing just 26 hours a week on average. We'll find out more in just a moment about our missing in action Workshy GPs. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Britain I grew up was the most peaceful, gentle society that has ever existed. That has been destroyed.
Opinion polls show immigration is the #1 concern to the British public. Are you proud to be British?
Yeah, I'm ever so proud.
My name is Stephen Edgington, and in this documentary, I want to find out how Britain became a nation of immigrants. Immigration, the Truth. Available from the 19th of September at gbnews.com.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Luis Elizondo says that he worked at the Pentagon and that he knows that they have recovered material that is not from this Earth. He resigned after believing his government wasn't taking the threat of UFOs seriously. So have they been covering up alien material from us?
I don't think the claims that are being made in Luis Elizondo's book, Imminent, are new. But I think what we have to pay attention to is the seniority of, one, Luis Elizondo, and two, the people who recruited him, and indeed the people he worked for, which was the Department of Defence and the Pentagon.
You think that he was in a position to know about this?
Yeah, he would have been. He would have been speaking to the individuals who were taking part in these investigations. You're showing some of those clips just now that potential incursions by objects controlled by a non-human intelligence, potentially. We're not saying alien necessarily, but something non-human.
Seems a bit far-fetched to me, Andrew. I'm a sceptic.
When people say sceptical, I think as a species, we're relatively new in terms of what we do in space. But right now, we've got a robot on Mars that drives about and has a little helicopter drone that every so often comes up, flies about away 10 feet from it to collect samples and comes back. Now, a species a couple of hundred years down the line from us would have far better technology than that. So who's to say what we're encountering aren't just really advanced probes from something else that's just slightly ahead of us in the technological scale? I don't think that's too far stretch of the imagination.
When you do see things like what we just saw there, which was made public, the New York Times did a big expose on all of this, and actually, you know, the world didn't end. We weren't all outside fighting each other for scraps of food and burning down the nearest Lidl, were we? We just thought, oh, that's quite cool.
I think now we have to look at it and maybe take a step back, look at the people coming out now, talking about UFOs and thinking, is there something to this that we've maybe been overlooking?
GB News, the People's Channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 4:49. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, Harland and Wolff, the iconic Belfast company that built the Titanic, is sadly set to sink into administration. And we're now joined by our Northern Ireland reporter, Doogie Beattie, to tell us more. Doogie, what's the story?
Well, this is like many large manufacturing companies across the UK. Their books depend on very small profit margins, and that's mainly because of net zero. These companies have to really look after what goes into the atmosphere, and it adds on many, many costs to them and makes them very uncompetitive. But next on this one for Harland and Wolff is the protocol, the framework document that Boris Johnson and then Rishi Sunak put in place, which means that 25% levies are put on goods that are coming from Britain. So the likes of British Steel supplying steel here for the 3 warships that's meant to be made here, of course, they will have to have 25% paid up front to make sure that those goods do not go into the European Union. After they prove that they haven't gone into the European Union, after those ships are made, well, then they can claim it back. And of course, that is causing major problems for cash flow inside firms like this. And the civil service here really do not understand cash flow. The public sector doesn't understand it. We spoke to a couple of companies yesterday. Some of them are waiting on £250,000 back and are told that they'll not get that for another 6 months. And those are the levies that were paid to HMRC, and those companies are saying, well, what's the sense in continuing to manufacture in Northern Ireland? And that really brings us to the likes of Michelle O'Neill, who supports the protocol. She's for an all-Ireland economy, and she is saying that it's so important to save this shipyard. Really and clearly, the economics don't add up. The public sector needs to learn about cash flow, and the protocol needs to be looked at once more.
Thank you there. The Titanic shipbuilder sank by EU tariffs, a bodged Brexit and net zero. Thank you very much, Doogie Beattie. Now, moving quickly on, have you ever wondered why you can't get a GP appointment? Is it immigration, waiting lists or budget cuts? Well, no, the answer could be simpler, because Workshy GPs are working just 26 hours every week. It's an astonishing report. And I'm now joined by the former chairman of the BMA's General Practitioners Committee, Dr. Lawrence Buckland. Dr. Buckland, does this come as any surprise to you? 26 hours a week. Where are they? GPs are missing in action.
GPs have reduced their workload, and they're saying, well, OK, we'll say goodbye to the money as well. And so they're working less. And GPs like me are seen as dinosaurs. We're old-fashioned. We were doing many more sessions a week. Most GPs now work much less than full-time. They don't get paid more, so they're actually losing money, but they're saying, oh, I'd rather lose the money, I don't want to work those hours. And it's not so much work shy as the hours are so pressurised, they always have been, but it's got worse in recent years, that younger GPs actually don't want to go on doing it.
But Dr. Buckland, as I understand it, NHS GPs are contracted to work 37.5 hours a week. They're only choosing to work 26. And this report says that's because they are unwilling or unable to work. That can't be right.
Well, I think a few of them, for various reasons, are unable, but the majority are actually unwilling. And most practices don't pay people for work they're not doing. It would be remarkable if you got a full week's pay for not doing a full week's work. That would be very strange. So I don't think that can be normal. What's happening is doctors are saying, I only want to do 3 days a week. I don't want to do more than that. And I accept that my pay will be commensurate with that. And more doctors are looking at the way my generation of doctors worked and say, oh, I don't want to do that anymore. When I was doing a fairly typical 12 to 14 hour day, I have to say you can't go on doing that forever. And younger doctors look at that and say, why should I do that? I'll take the pay cut and I'll do less. The contract is with the practice, not the individual doctor. As long as the practice is delivering services across the piece, whether they're doing this doctor on this day and that doctor on that day is not an issue for the NHS. The NHS pays per capita of patients, not how long each doctor works. So doctors who do less work, they'll get less money. And many doctors now don't even want to be part of the business. They actually want to be salaried, and they just pick and choose when they do their salaries. And inevitably, that means less work and therefore less availability.
Astonishing. We have to leave it there. No wonder we can't get a GP appointment if they can't be bothered to turn up to work. Dr. Lawrence Buckland, thank you very, very much for joining us. Now, Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel. We'll have more on that shocking news from Lebanon next. But first, here's your weather with Aidan McGibbon.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there. Staying dry virtually everywhere for the next 24 hours with widespread sunny skies, although some cloud will arrive overnight and that will stick around for some time through tomorrow. High pressure, though, firmly in charge of the weather at the moment, and that's keeping things settled. Weather fronts staying at bay in the Atlantic, and cloud-free skies as we end the afternoon and go into the evening. The cloud across northern Scotland finally disappearing as well, the rain in Shetland easing off. But another area of cloud will head into East Anglia and then into parts of the Midlands, southern and southeastern England, as well as East Wales. A few mist patches under that cloud. A milder night, though, where that cloud persists, colder to the north and west, with temperatures in the mid to low single figures in some sheltered spots, and a few mist and fog patches forming across parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England. But for much of central and southern England, as well as Wales, it's partly cloudy as we begin things, and that cloud persists through the morning. Northern England tending to be cloud-free. Blue skies also across Northern Ireland and Scotland, away from any fog patches. The fog sticking around until mid-morning and then tending to disappear, with the sun returning widely across Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern and Western England, as well as West Wales. Across East Wales into the Midlands, the cloud will stick around until, say, early to mid-afternoon in places, and even then, for the east coast, there could be some lingering cloud through the day, but inland, plenty of sunshine and feeling warm in that sunshine with highs of 24, 25 Celsius across southern parts, and across northern Scotland as well, we'll see some warmth with highs of 22 or 23. Into the evening, we'll see further cloud arriving into the east and across central parts, and that becomes somewhat more extensive as we start off Thursday, and again slower to push back to the east coast. Otherwise, Thursday's a fine day, but Friday brings some showers to the south.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. Eastbound M62 is struggling from the Croft interchange to Birchwood. That's junction 10 to 11. There's a breakdown blocking a lane causing queues. All the traffic on the westbound M4 is being held at the turn for Slough and Windsor junction 6. HGV involved in a collision there, so nothing on the move at the moment, and it's queuing. A couple of issues on the M25. Anti-clock firstly around Darren, the 2 lane 1's combed off for a breakdown. Clockwise, Enfield 25 to Waltham Abbey 26, a lane shut. Heavy back to Potters Bar 24, that follows an earlier collision there. Northbound M11's part blocked, Bishop Stortford at 8, after Saffron Walden at 9 queues for a collision. And the eastbound M27, the entry slip road's closed coming on at junction 3 Southampton Docks. There's a vehicle fire there. Naturally, that's causing delays as well this afternoon. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
You could be the good luck.
Tune in to Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. GB News royalty with your perfect start to the weekend. Lucky us! Feisty and fearless guests.
Well, I'm a normal person, so ask me.
Honest opinions that raises more questions than a Gary Barlow tax return. And a few surprises along the way. Might be cold in this studio. That is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. 8 to 9 only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
A very good afternoon to you. It's 5 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News. We're broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. On today's show, 8 people have now been confirmed dead and over 2,750 people have been injured, including members of the terrorist group Hezbollah, as well as the Iranian ambassador to Lebanon, when their pagers exploded earlier today. We'll bring you all the latest lines on this astonishing story. And after GB News exclusively learned that the Rotherham grooming gang survivor was denied the opportunity to demand that her abuser be deported back to Pakistan, today we're asking, is it time to deport all 10,000 foreign criminals in British jails to help ease overcrowding? And a Liberal Democrat councillor has claimed that she has a diagnosis of PTSD over Brexit. Comparing herself to a fighter in Sudan, she added, "Brexit has had a profound impact on me. She's the biggest snowflake of the decade." And a shock new analysis of NHS data shows that GPs work an average of just 26 hours per week, and that's down from 30 hours in 2016. The report adds that doctors are either unwilling or unable to work longer. Do these work-shy quacks need doctors' orders to get back to their desks? And that's all coming up in your next hour. Welcome to the show. Always a pleasure to have your company. An astonishing story about to bring you now of exploding pagers, what seems like a dedicated and targeted attack on Hezbollah terrorists. Exploding devices have now confirmed 8 dead and injured over 2,500. Mark White will bring this astonishing story shortly. Get in touch. All the usual ways, gbnews.com/your say. But first, here's your headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Martin, thank you. It's just gone 5 o'clock. These are your headlines. As you've been hearing, in the Middle East, we're hearing reports that 8 people have been killed and 2,700 injured, including members of the Hezbollah terrorist group, when their communication pages exploded. You can see here footage appearing to show the moment one of the devices exploded. It's being described as the biggest security breach so far in nearly a year of conflict with Israel. A journalist for the Reuters news agency reported seeing ambulances rushing through Beirut's southern suburbs amid widespread panic, with explosions continuing for 30 minutes after the initial blasts. At this stage, there's been no comment yet from the Israeli military. Back in the UK, the government says it is tackling small boat crossings on all fronts, following news that 10,000 people have crossed the channel in small boats since Labour came to power in July. Home Office figures show 65 more migrants arrived on Monday, bringing the year's total to nearly 23,600, though that's down 1% from this time last year. The latest crossings follow the deaths of 8 migrants over the weekend as the government boosts funding for border security. Home Secretary Yvette Coopers announced £75 million for more officers, cameras and technology to combat people smuggling. Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer says he's also looking at Italy's immigration policies for possible solutions. Meanwhile, Health Secretary Wes Streeting says the end of a pay dispute with junior doctors marks a first step in the government's mission to reform the broken health service. Members of the British Medical Association have voted to accept the government's offer of a 22% pay rise over 2 years. However, the Conservatives are warning the government not to set a precedent by awarding striking workers with what they've described as bumper pay rises. This morning, Deputy Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Daisy Cooper, told us her party still think more can be done.
Part of the answer is pay, but as I say, it's just a first step. What we Liberal Democrats want to see is a really ambitious budget in October. We want the Labour government to use the budget to be a budget to save our NHS and care services, and as part of that we want to see an increase in day-to-day spending, not by taxing struggling families but by reversing the tax cuts for the big banks and closing the loopholes in capital gains tax so the wealthiest pay a little bit more. But we also want to see borrowing to repair our crumbling hospitals and GP surgeries too.
Now, in other news, BBC boss Tim Davie says he can't see Hugh Edwards ever returning to the corporation after the disgraced presenter admitted to accessing indecent images of children. Speaking at the Royal Television Society conference, Davey called the former newsreader's actions appalling crimes that have damaged the BBC's reputation. He confirmed Edwards continued to receive £200,000 in salary until formal charges were made, but the BBC is now seeking to reclaim that money. He also says the victims' families remain the corporation's top priority. Now, in the US, Donald Trump has spoken publicly for the first time since being targeted in an apparent assassination attempt on his Florida golf course. Speaking in a live stream on social media, the former president described being grabbed by Secret Service agents after 4 or 5 gunshots rang out. 58-year-old Ryan Routh is facing federal gun charges after a Secret Service agent spotted a rifle poking through the bushes and opened fire on the suspect. Mr. Trump's also praised his protection team and, in a rare show of political unity, commended President Joe Biden for calling him.
I was with an agent, and the agent did a fantastic job. There was no question that we were off that course. I would have loved to have sank that last putt, but we decided, well, let's get out of here. We do need more people on my detail because we have 50, 60,000 people showing up to events, and other people don't have that.
Staying in the US, the rapper Sean Combs, also known as P. Diddy, has been charged with 3 federal charges, including racketeering, sex trafficking and transportation to engage in prostitution. That's according to an indictment that was unsealed today. The 54-year-old music mogul is under investigation after a number of women came forward. Combs has denied all the claims, and his team insists he's innocent and ready to clear his name in court. Those are your latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Martin.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sophia. To our top story, it's an astonishing story. 8 people have now died and over 2,750 have been injured, including members of the terrorist group Hezbollah, as well as fighters and medics, when electronic pager devices that they used to communicate exploded. The Iranian ambassador to Lebanon has also reportedly been injured, and it's being described as the biggest security breach the group has been subjected to in nearly 1 year of war with Israel. And the Israeli military are yet to comment. It's an incredible story, and some more detail now. I'm joined by our Homeland Security editor, Mark White. This is just an incredible story, Mark. It seems to be a dedicated, concerted, targeted attack on hugely multiple targets, all at the same time. Incredible story. Tell us more.
Yeah, I've been a journalist for almost 4 decades now, and this is a new one for me. I've never heard of a story like this. We're bringing you live images at the moment from one of the main hospitals in the Lebanese capital, Beirut. Nighttime descending on the Lebanese capital, but many, many injured being dealt with at multiple hospitals around southern Lebanon. As you said there, close to 3,000 people, according to the Lebanese Health Ministry, have been injured as a result of what was undoubtedly an audacious attack. All fingers are going to point at Israeli intelligence or Israeli military. No word from the Israeli government as yet, either confirming or denying this operation in southern Lebanon. It may be that they never do. When it is a clandestine operation like this, then they are often reluctant to confirm or deny. We can give you an exclusive line, though, with regard to the injuries suffered by many of them Hezbollah terrorists. A senior security source, has told me that messages were sent to the pagers, and many of the injured had been answering that message, or effectively taking the pager out of their pocket or off their belt, wherever it was clipped, to put it up to their face to have a look at the message when the devices exploded. And that's why we're seeing presented at hospital many of the injured missing a hand, or at least with very badly mangled hands and quite significant head trauma. 8 confirmed dead at the moment. Some of those Hezbollah fighters, we believe. There are reports of a 10-year-old girl having been killed as well, but we don't know the circumstances surrounding her death and the proximity to one of these pagers, how exactly that happened. You're looking at images now of the moment of detonation. You'll see in a second a puff from the blast. You can see quite significant blast. There's no sound on that. It's internal store footage there. Another at an outdoor market, a man that was carrying one of the pagers falls to the ground. He'd obviously not answered the pager to bring it up to his face, so it seems to have exploded on his belt or his pocket, and he's fallen to the ground. So again, this security source telling me, Martin, that those who either never heard the page or hadn't yet taken the pager out to have a look at it suffered injuries to their lower extremities, but many of the injured, as say, being treated in hospital. The images we are now looking at is from one of those main hospitals in the Lebanese capital, as person after person is being brought through the emergency services door there with an array of injuries. All the health medical staff across southern Lebanon are being called back in to deal with the very significant number of injuries in what the Lebanese government are calling a mass casualty attack.
And Mark White, as you say, no comment yet from the Israeli force, and perhaps, as you also add, we'll never get that. But clearly, this is a huge security breach. There are thousands, literally, of targets who've been hit all at the same time. A huge embarrassment, as well as a huge strategic damage to Hezbollah. Clearly, they've been infiltrated. Clearly, devices supplied to them with bad intent. Now the investigation will begin. And as you say, for the Iranian ambassador to be linked, it just goes to show, Mark White, how far the tendrils of Hezbollah may be spreading.
Well, yes, indeed. And the latest line just coming through from our producer, Rob O'Halloran, telling us that Hezbollah clearly are of the mind to blame Israel for this. They are saying Israel will get its fair punishment. That coming through now, a statement very short to the point. Hezbollah clearly know or believe that this was the hands of Israel at work here. And it's hard to see this really being anyone else at play here. The sophistication to launch such an operation in hundreds, potentially thousands of pager devices. Other sources telling the Reuters news agency that the pagers involved were all the latest model Motorola pagers that were provided to Hezbollah in recent months. Now that's interesting because the Hezbollah leader, Hassan Nasrallah, ordered his fighters not to use their mobile phones or smartphones and other mobile phones for fear that Israeli intelligence officials and Israeli military intelligence were gaining access and intelligence from the conversations and texts being exchanged on these phones. So he said, go old school, we'll go back to pagers. And so it may be that in the light of that, Hezbollah got themselves thousands of pagers provided through some third party. How that was done is just incredible in itself. If Israel was able to adapt these pagers, put high explosives inside them, then get them to a third party to ensure that they were snapped up by Hezbollah and then distributed, they would still have had to have been able to work and been in their possession for some time and receiving messages. Then when that decision was taken that this was go time, a message was obviously sent to the pagers, detonating these devices within a few seconds. Worth saying as well, Martin, as well, with regard to the explosions that took place. They have come within hours of the Israeli government officially saying that they are widening the scope of their war. So we know, of course, that the war in Gaza was aimed at securing the release of the hostages still being held, over 100 of them, and dealing trying to eliminate the terrorist group Hamas. Now they've said it is also about ensuring that those displaced Israeli citizens, 60,000 of them who've had to flee northern Israel because of the attacks by Hezbollah, can return home. So read into that exactly what it is. They are going after Hezbollah now to ensure that those Israeli citizens in the north can live free of attack from Hezbollah. And now within hours, we're seeing this very coordinated attack on Hezbollah fighters.
It's an incredible story, Mark White, and we're just learning that the Hezbollah are claiming that their leader has not been injured in this story. That's the latest line. Thank you very much, Mark White. And let's continue this conversation now, because I'm joined by Andrew Fox, retired Major Andrew Fox from the Henry Jackson Society. Welcome to the show. Thank you very much for joining us now. Just want to read out a bit of your service history. As I understand, 16 years of service. Thank you for that, including 3 tours of Afghanistan, 1 year with the US Special Forces Parachute Regiment, and also the Special Forces Support Group. So you know about the conflict of the Middle East. Have you ever heard of anything as audacious as this attack today?
No, and I think we're possibly in the realms here of the very first weaponized cyber attack. You know, everyone's been talking about the threats to infrastructure of cyber, you know, potentially taking down power networks and that kind of thing. And yet here we're seeing a cyber attack weaponized to actually kill people or damage people. So this is a fascinating evolution in technological warfare.
And it was obviously very targeted, very orchestrated, very joined up. Would have taken a lot of planning. The devices themselves would have had to have been got into enemy territory, of course, undercover. So there'll be a whole series of questions there about the chain of command there, how that was even able to happen. And now, Andrew Fox, of course, the Iranian ambassador implicated, so the tendrils of Hezbollah will be exposed amongst the list of the injured and even the deceased.
Well, we've known for a very long time that Hezbollah is a straight-up Iranian proxy organisation. So the fact that the Iranian ambassador is so, intensely involved is no real surprise to anyone. You could also make a suggestion that actually this wasn't an explosive pager. They've simply hacked the network using human intelligence, and they've caused the batteries to explode. If you look at the size of the bangs that are going off in those videos, that's entirely in line with a detonating battery, which would involve a huge bit of human intelligence and penetration of that network. So there's a few options on the table here. But I think the really interesting point is that, the Israelis have talked about an escalation in the north with Hezbollah. And I wonder if this could be potentially a prelude to further airstrikes and further attacks on Hezbollah's chain of command.
It's an astonishingly covert op. I mean, we all expected missiles to be going in or airstrikes, but this is something that I thought few people would ever have seen coming, Andrew Fox. And I guess the question now is, once Hezbollah gets over its embarrassment, its obvious casualty list and its investigation will begin, do you think there's a very real danger now conflict could further escalate in the area? And do you think if that's the case, it's a price Israel are prepared to pay?
Well, it's hard to see where that escalation would come from necessarily. I mean, Hezbollah have already fired nearly 10,000 rockets into Israel since the 8th of October last year. We've seen the Israelis responding with some 14,500 airstrikes. There's no facility for Hezbollah to conduct any kind of ground operations against Israel. I think the big question is, do we see any ground operations from the Israelis at this point? Because they need to drive Hezbollah back out of rocket range so that people in Israel can move home to the north. And that's the 10-kilometre line up to the Litani River in Lebanon. Israel need to get Hezbollah back beyond that. So the only real way you can do that is through ground operations. And I wonder how much of this is a precursor to that as they start to wrap up operations in Gaza.
Andrew Fox, fascinating information that they could simply overload the battery remotely, causing it to explode. That's a plot twist I don't think any of us saw coming. But this will be a huge embarrassment for Hezbollah, won't it? They've been infiltrated, they've been hit, they've been hurt, and they'll be severely on a back foot as a result of today's operation.
That's right. And, Israel's strategy for the last 10, 11 months has been to try and degrade their command and control networks. The airstrikes have been heavily focused not only on rocket launches, but also on Hezbollah commanders. Hundreds have been killed, including Shakur, who was their number 2. He was killed in an airstrike in Beirut a few months ago. It shows that Hezbollah, whilst they have a very significant threat to Israel of the sheer scale of rockets, 130,000 is a minimum before the war started. The Israelis still have very much the ability to counterpunch and hit Hezbollah where it really hurts.
Fascinating stuff. Thank you so much for joining us. Andrew Fox from the Henry Jackson Society. Great stuff. Please join us again on the show at a future date. Thank you. Now, coming up in a GB News exclusive, Rotherham rape gang survivors demand deportation for their abusers. Our reporter Charlie Peters will have all the latest on this GB News exclusive. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Britain I grew up was the most peaceful, gentle society that has ever existed. That has been destroyed.
Opinion polls show immigration is the #1 concern to the British public. Are you proud to be British?
Yeah, I'm ever so proud.
My name is Stephen Edgington, and in this documentary, I want to find out how Britain became a nation of immigrants. Immigration, the Truth. Available from the 19th of September at gbnews.com.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Club Classique, previously known as Méthode Club Classique, is South Africa's answer to the famous French fizz.
They basically have to be made in South Africa and also by the traditional method. So it's exactly the same method as champagne, but is it made in a different place. So they can't call it champagne because it's not made in Champagne, but it's very similar.
And on the other hand, in Prosecco, it all happens in a sort of great vat.
Yes,
doesn't it?
Yes.
Which is why Prosecco tastes different from
Yeah.
other sparkling wines.
Prosecco will taste much more fruity because you don't have the thing called lees aging. Insert the wine with brioche, biscuity, toasty flavours and aromas, which makes it much more complex.
Here we've got a thing called Journey's End.
Yes.
And would you like to tell us, I've said that people didn't want to splash out on champers. They might want to go the Cap Classique route.
Yes.
What would they be saving? How much might that cost in a shop?
So this one here will cost you about £17. So it is considerably, I guess, better value for money than champagne.
But I'd also comment that it's probably a good deal cheaper than English sparkling wine, which is interesting.
Yes, that is correct.
Now, the second one is
Yes.
called Kleiner Salzer.
It is, yes.
And you told me this is a little more expensive.
It is. It is.
What price were we talking about here?
About 20.
About 20.
Yes.
Not vastly more.
No.
Are we going to taste £3 worth of improvement? Oh, and by the way, it went so beautifully with the cheese, just as you advised. Are South African sparkling wines, Cap Classique, are they pretty well available in English wine shops, British wine shops?
They are, yes. You can find them in all of the supermarkets. Growing Beck, and that's on offer at the moment, actually. That's $11.99 from Waitrose, which is exceptional value.
That is insane.
Yes, it is. And you can also, so I bought with me today, so this is a Pinot Noir only, so that's a rosé sparkling.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 5:24. I'm Martin Daubney and this is GB News. A Rotherham sexual exploitation survivor was ordered to remove a demand for her abuser to be deported. GB News can exclusively reveal. The woman gave a moving statement in Sheffield Crown Court last week, over 20 years after she was groomed and abused from the age of just 11 by the Pakistani heritage men. but the judge made her remove any reference to deporting the offenders. So today I'm asking, should we deport foreign criminals like these groomers? And joining us in the studio is the man who got that exclusive story for us, and it's our national reporter, Charlie Peters. Charlie, I say it to you every time, fantastic work. Thank you for making sure these survivors got a voice. An impact statement is not a legally binding document, but it's a courtesy afforded to those who've been through terrible, terrible trauma. Why on earth was it censored in this way?
Well, the conversation that happened between the CPS barrister and the judge, they referred to how it was for the Home Office to decide. That conversation was not relevant to the courtroom, but it was relevant to the survivor. And I think it's relevant also to the country, because there have been so many of these cases, and there have been so few successful prosecutions and indeed zero successful deportations. As far as I look through all the research I've done on this scandal across the country, I can't find a case of a man being deported because of a grooming gang, group-localised child sexual exploitation prosecution. There are two men still fighting deportation in Rochdale who were convicted in 2012, released from prison in 2016 and 2018, respectively. Hundreds of thousands of pounds of legal aid has been spent on their case fighting that deportation order, even when it was pushed through by the Home Office and an immigration tribunal. Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Greater Manchester, he's also asked for an update on that case, but it's not moving anywhere. So you can understand, within that political context, this survivor wanted to stand up in the courtroom and tell those defendants who subjected her to harrowing and dehumanising abuse for much of her childhood, a childhood that she said was stolen. She said she wanted to tell them that they should be deported after they've served their sentence, but the judge wouldn't allow it. She has shared with GB News the full victim impact statement she wanted to deliver, and it includes that line. But unfortunately, in the witness stand, she wasn't allowed to say it.
Thank you, Charlie Peters. And to continue this conversation, I'm now joined by the human rights lawyer, Tasneem Akunji. Thank you for joining us on the show, Mr. Akunji. So, quite simply, if a Pakistani or any foreign-born man in this instance rapes an 11-year-old girl repeatedly for many years, traffics them around towns like a piece of meat, 150 men raped this child, why on earth should that person have any right to remain in the United Kingdom?
Well, under the law, if somebody is a foreign national, then they can be deported if they have a sentence that's over 12 months. So that is the law as it stands. The question is, what do you define a foreign national as? So I think these individuals are British citizens, and so the only question that remains, the law doesn't allow for the deportation of British citizens unless their citizenship is revoked. And there is a provision, as we know in the Shamima Begum case, for stripping people of citizenship. So the question as to, why has this not happened is a question of policy. And there's a conflation here between defining somebody as foreign when they're actually a British citizen, which means that we ought to really accept them as what they are in terms of their status, rather than looking to their heritage, which isn't really relevant to whether they're deported or not. So if they are British citizens, they've got no other citizenship, then they can't be deported unless their citizenship is revoked.
But we have over 10,300 foreign-born nationals in British jails, and we have a terrible ability to deport. Only 3,000 odd were sent back, and lots of these people are for countries where we have extradition treaties: Albania, Poland, Romania, even Ireland, Jamaica, not just in this instance, Pakistanis. So why do you think we have such a terrible hit rate? Is it because the Home Office are resistant?
No, I think we've got a terrible Home Office, really, don't we? They tend not to be able to function as they're supposed to. So regardless of whichever part of the Home Office you're looking at, it's just not a functional place, almost regardless of who's in government. So I think that's really the general problem there. In this particular case, there has been some mention that Pakistan's been refusing to take back individuals who are proposed to be deported, and that presents a particular problem where if the country's not willing to take them, then where will they go? It's a practical issue. But, we have the Sharifs in government in Pakistan. They have a lot of money in the UK and assets, and an unexplained wealth order, shaken in their general direction might make them think again about their position.
OK, Mr Akunji, I'm joined by our national reporter Charlie Peters, who heard that impact statement and was given the uncensored version. He has a question for you.
Tasneem, when you're discussing the dual nationals who you say might not necessarily be deported due to questions of heritage, we do know, and take, for example, there was a pure foreign national, no British citizenship whatsoever, whether it's scrapped or otherwise. We know that under the Nationalities and Borders Act of 2022, the government can apply visa penalties for countries that refuse to accept those criminal deportation orders. Would you like to see that power applied in this case for grooming gang abusers not being deported back to countries such as Pakistan? Do you think they should be punished for that?
So the power exists, and you're right, it hasn't been used. And I think, one has to think about how many people come over to the UK legally every year. Now, we have a sort of rhetoric that's somewhat against immigration at the moment, yet you've got compound immigration happening. So the truth is, behind the scenes, in order to drive the economy, we need cheap labour, which is why we have so many individuals coming over legally into the UK. So there's a tension between the polemic, what's being said by politicians, and actually the reality on the ground, which is immigrants drive the economy. So we're going to get a bit of duplicity there, and that's what we're seeing. We're seeing polemic, which says one thing, but the reality is the economy needs the opposite.
And Tasneem, can I quickly ask you, you're representing Shamima Begum. What's the latest on that case?
Sorry, I'm representing her family, not her. It's Gareth Pearce that represents Shamima Begum.
And what's the latest on the case? Do you have any update for us, or at the moment she's still stuck in limbo?
She's stuck in limbo, and the matter has been referred to the European Convention, the European courts, basically, for adjudication.
Is she hopeful? Are you hopeful? Are the family hopeful that she'll ever be returned, or do you think that won't ever happen?
I think the attitude of the European courts is going to be somewhat different to the Supreme Court here, and that's just borne out by the fact that many European countries have taken their people who are in similar circumstances back. But it remains to be seen. I mean, by the time we get there, the attitudes may have even flipped around, so we shall see what takes place.
So you're hoping then, Tasneem, that the European Court of Human Rights will override British law in this instance, and Shamima Begum can return thanks to Strasbourg?
Yeah, indeed. It's our own politicians who haven't left the framework of the European Court of Human Rights, and so we have accepted that as a jurisdictional issue.
OK, well, that'd be an astonishing moment if that happens. Thanks for joining us on the show. Human rights lawyer Tasneem Akunji there. Thank you very much for your time on the show. Still lots more to come between now and 6 o'clock, including one Liberal Democrat councillor actually revealed that she was diagnosed with PTSD over Brexit during their party conference. You couldn't make it up. What a snowflake. First, here's your headlines, and it's Sophia Wensler.
Martin, thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Sophia Wensler with your headlines at 5:32. First, to the Middle East, where it's understood 8 people have been killed and 2,700 injured, including members of the Hezbollah terrorist group, when their communication pages exploded. You can see here footage appearing to show the moment one of the devices exploded. It's being described as the biggest security breach so far in nearly a year of conflict with Israel. A journalist for the Reuters news agency reported seeing ambulances rushing through Beirut's southern suburbs amid widespread panic, with explosions continuing for 30 minutes after the initial blasts. Hezbollah claim Israel is to blame for the pager blasts, adding they will get fair punishment. But at this stage, there's been no comment from the Israeli military. Back in the UK, the government says it is tackling small boat crossings on all fronts, following news that 10,000 people have crossed the channel in small boats since Labour came to power in July. Home Office figures show 65 more migrants arrived on Monday, bringing the year's total to nearly 23,600, though that's down 1% from this time last year. The latest crossings follow the deaths of 8 migrants over the weekend as the government boosts funding for border security. Home Secretary Yvette Coopers announced £75 million for more officers, cameras and technology to combat people smuggling. Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer says he's also looking at Italy's immigration policies for possible solutions. And Health Secretary Wes Streeting says the end of the pay dispute with junior doctors marks a first step in the government's mission to reforming the broken health service. Members of the British Medical Association have voted to accept the government's offer of a 22% pay rise over 2 years. However, the Conservatives are warning the government not to set a precedent by awarding striking workers with what they've described as bumper pay rises. This morning, Deputy Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Daisy Cooper, told us her party still think more can be done.
Part of the answer is pay, but as I say, it's just a first step. What we Liberal Democrats want to see is a really ambitious budget in October. We want the Labour government to use the budget to be a budget to save our NHS and care services. And as part of that, we want to see an increase in day-to-day spending, not by taxing struggling families, but by reversing the tax cuts for the big banks and closing the loopholes in capital gains tax so the wealthiest pay a little bit more. But we also want to see borrowing to repair our crumbling hospitals and GP surgeries too.
And finally, Instagram is rolling out new safety features for teenagers, placing all users under the age of 16 into stricter teen accounts. The default settings include private profiles, limited messaging and restricted content, with parents required to approve any changes. The update comes as social media platforms face growing pressure to protect children from harmful online content ahead of the UK's Online Safety Act. Meta's Nick Clegg says the move shifts the balance in favour of parents, offering them more control over their children's Instagram use. The changes will be implemented in the UK, US, Canada and Australia within 2 months. Those are your latest GB News headlines. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Now here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.3160 and 1.1836 euros. The price of gold is £1,949 and 60 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100 closed the day at 8,309 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you, Sophie. And that's a quick reminder, if you missed our last interview, Tasnim Akunji, who's the Shamima Begum family lawyer, just admitted on the show that he's taken the case to the European Court of Human Rights. He's hoping Strasbourg overrules Westminster. If that happens, it's going to mightily kick off. Talking of which, I'm now joined by Michelle Dewberry, of course, Jubes & Co, 6 till 7, the queen of primetime political debate. Jubes, what's on your menu?
Hello, Martin. Well, of course, we'll be debating all the top news of the day. I also want to ask as well, are we about to see the Labour Party waging war on landlords? And if so, is that the right approach? One of my panel, Ben Habib, he's a man that knows a thing or two about property, so I'll be interested in his view. But what about the viewers at home? What do you reckon about landlords? They get a bad name, don't they? Is it justified or not? They can tell me and I'll read some of their views.
Superb stuff. Jubes & Co, 6 till 7, always a delight. Thank you very much. It's going to be a great show. Now then, coming up soon, I'll be focusing on the Liberal Democrat councillor who's got PTSD over, wait for it, Brexit. You couldn't make it up. She actually said there was no point in living after she voted to remain. What a snowflake. That's coming next. I'm Martin Daubney.
Hi there. Staying dry virtually everywhere for the next 24 hours with widespread sunny skies, although some cloud will arrive overnight and that will stick around for some time through tomorrow. High pressure, though, firmly in charge of the weather at the moment, and that's keeping things settled. Weather fronts staying at bay in the Atlantic and cloud-free skies as we end the afternoon and go into the evening. The cloud across northern Scotland finally disappearing as well, the rain in Shetland easing off. But another area of cloud will head into East Anglia and then into parts of the Midlands, southern and southeastern England, as well as East Wales. A few mist patches under that cloud. A milder night, though, where that cloud persists, colder to the north and west, with temperatures in the mid to low single figures in some sheltered spots, and a few mist and fog patches forming across parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England. But for much of central and southern England, as well as Wales, It's partly cloudy as we begin things, and that cloud persists through the morning. Northern England tending to be cloud-free. Blue skies also across Northern Ireland and Scotland, away from any fog patches. The fog sticking around until mid-morning and then tending to disappear, with the sun returning widely across Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern and Western England, as well as West Wales. Across East Wales into the Midlands, the cloud will stick around until, say, early to mid-afternoon in places, and even then, for the east coast, there could be some lingering cloud through the day, but inland, plenty of sunshine and feeling warm in that sunshine with highs of 24, 25 Celsius across southern parts, and across northern Scotland as well, we'll see some warmth with highs of 22 or 23. Into the evening, we'll see further cloud arriving into the east and across central parts, and that becomes somewhat more extensive as we start off Thursday, and again slower to push back to the east coast. Otherwise, Thursday's a fine day, but Friday brings some showers to the south.
The latest GB News travel.
Charlie Power, the M11 northbound queuing at the moment, lane closed for an accident between 8 for Bishop Stortford and 9 for Saffron Walden. The coastbound M2 in Kent also has the entry slip road closed for a shed load at junction 5 for Sittingbourne and the Stockbury roundabout. It looks like traffic coping fairly well around that one. Staying on the coastbound M20, there's a lane closed for a broken down vehicle between 3 and 4 for Leybourne and Snodland. The M27 in Hampshire, the eastbound side, entry slip roads closed, delays there for an earlier vehicle fire at junction 3 for Southampton Docks. The westbound M4 in Berkshire, that's queuing for an earlier accident at junction 6 for Slough and Windsor. And the northbound A1M in North Yorkshire, also 2 lanes closed, queuing traffic because of an accident between 50 and 51. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back, 5:41, the final furlong. Time now for the Great British Giveaway and your chance to win the equivalent of having an extra £3,000 in your bank account each month for all of next year. That's a whopping 36 grand in tax-free moolah. Now, here's all the details that you need for a chance to make it yours.
Good luck.
Now, here's one for you, because today marks the final day of the Liberal Democrats' party conference in Brighton, and that's as one Lib Dem councillor revealed that she was diagnosed with PTSD over Brexit. Antonia Harrison claims something had died in her after Britain left the European Union. And let's speak now to the former police officer and the co-founder of PTSD 999, Gary Hayes. Gary, welcome to the show. PTSD, of course, is a very serious condition. I understand, Gary, you suffer from that yourself. How does it make you feel when you find out a Liberal Democrat claims they too have this condition because of Brexit?
I mean, I think the thing we need to focus on here is who diagnosed this individual, and is there previous trauma from childhood, etc., or is she suffering from vicarious post-traumatic stress disorder, which opens up a whole new avenue? But if it's if people are using PTSD as an excuse for not getting their own way or finding themselves in difficulty at work, it doesn't ring true with me. But I don't know the full disclosure of this case, so it'd be difficult for me. I'm not a doctor or a clinician. I'm just a chronic complex sufferer of the condition.
Gary, there is a bit more detail. She said, I've got a diagnosis of PTSD over Brexit, but she admitted, I've not been in Sudan fighting in a war, but Brexit has had a profound impact on me. And she says here, the day after the election, I told my daughter, this is the worst day of your life. And apparently that's because they got a property in Marbella and they plan to retire there and can't.
I mean, that opens up a whole new sort of packet of suggestions to us why that she might be claiming PTSD. It would be interesting to speak to the clinician that diagnosed the condition, but we need to remember there are so many variants of post-traumatic stress. I'm a chronic complex sufferer after the aftermath of the London bombings in 2005 and the work I undertook, all the fatalities I dealt with as a police officer, and even going back to childhood trauma. So again, not knowing the full background of this individual's life, it would be difficult to make a suggestion that this is, I don't know, for want of a better word, just a claim because things haven't gone her way. There might be something there that is quite bona fide, and the reflection on the clinician's diagnosis is true. But again, if it's just boiling around what you've just said of we can't go to Marbella, well, it's a bit sickening, really.
Yeah, there was another line which may give us some more detail. And she said that her daughter has a master's degree in international law. She should be in Brussels, like I was at her age, and instead she is stuck here. And again, Gary, I know you're being very diplomatic without having a pop. It doesn't seem akin here to witnessing an actual traumatic life event. It does feel a bit like somebody has a Brussels variant of PTSD because they simply aren't happy about the fact we voted to leave the European Union.
Yeah, I think when we break it down to its basic component parts, PTSD, as we've just said, it's got its own very specific diagnostic labelling. Repeated trauma. It could be a single trauma. It could be something quite simple. Now, if this lady suggests that her trauma is down to Brexit, but I think that's down for you and your viewers to make up your minds in relation to her, dare we say, state of mental health and well-being. Again, it's difficult for me to make that diagnosis because I'm not a clinician. However, as we say, unfortunately, PTSD and mental health and trauma is very specific to the individual. So therefore, this is a bit out there, if I was to be quite honest with you. Given that the police officers, fire officers, ambulance technicians, paramedics, and all of the people that run on the blue light that we speak to regularly are exposed to this repeated trauma, it's sort of, dare we say, this could sort of fall on the wrong side of the line.
Yeah, thank you very much for your expertise and good luck with everything. Gary Hayes, the founder of PTSD 999. Now, Foreign Secretary David Lammy claims that climate change is a bigger threat than terrorism or even Russian President Vladimir Putin. What planet's he on? Stay tuned to find out more.
Tune in to Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. GB News royalty with your perfect start to the weekend. Lucky us. Feisty and fearless guests.
Well, I'm a normal person, so ask me.
Honest opinions that raises more questions than a Gary Barlow tax return. And a few surprises along the way. Might be cold in this studio. That is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. 8 to 9 only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Good morning, everybody. I honestly think Gen Z are as lazy as we've been made out. I was on GB News a couple of months ago talking about a report which suggested that they were very lazy, very work shy, and I honestly don't think that's the case. I respect my elders, so I'm certainly not going to sit here and blame them for the slow return to many offices across the country. But I am actually 20. I've run businesses since I was 15 and 16, since I dropped out of school, and I have always been pro-office, right? So I fit right into that Generation Z category, and I think the office environment is fantastic, not just professionally but socially for young people, especially kind of after COVID, and it halted a lot of their social plans or people going to university, etc. I think getting people into the office, being surrounded by the more senior people, the people with more experience, which is what we're talking about, older people, is actually incredibly positive. But I think Generation Z get a lot of stick in the media, and I'm often sat here debating this about them being called lazy. I guess I think probably what's different is technology is advanced, so people's jobs are a lot quicker, and Generation Z have obviously grew up with that technology, therefore in a position to do jobs quicker. And I guess that's kind of where that kind of narrative has come from, because Gen Z do really kind of go with the whole work smarter, not harder kind of mentality, which is often met with a little bit of stick.
I'm not knocking the young generation at all. I mean, I'm just saying it's by experience. Undoubtedly, they're not as hard-working as the more experienced worker, but I'm certainly not knocking them on that basis. If they had the opportunity, I'm sure there'd be more and more would want to get into the workplace. But unfortunately, I think this COVID has changed the world, and it's made younger people more lazy than older people. Older people just can't wait to, well, shouldn't say that, can't wait to get out of the house to get to work.
GB News, the People's Channel.
The Britain I grew up in was the most peaceful, gentle society that has ever existed. That has been destroyed.
Opinion polls show immigration is the #1 concern to the British public.
Are you proud to be British?
Yeah, I'm ever so proud.
My name is Stephen Edgington, and in this documentary, I want to find out how Britain became a nation of immigrants. Immigration, the Truth. Available from the 19th of September at gbnews.com.
Welcome back now. The Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, has said that climate change is a more fundamental threat than terrorism in his maiden speech given this afternoon. He said that although the climate issue may not feel as urgent as terrorism, it is pervasive and accelerating towards us at pace, assuring the public that it will be central to all the Foreign Office does. And Lammy also announced the government would launch a global initiative to accelerate the rollout of clean energy. Of course, now joining me now to discuss this in the studio is the Director at Climate Media Coalition, Donica McCarthy. Welcome to the show. Always a pleasure to have your company. A lot of people roll their eyes at the prospect that climate change can be a bigger existential threat than terrorism, but something tells me you might agree with Mr. Lammy.
Yeah, well, today is an extraordinary day. Look at the rolling news. Normally you might have one extreme weather event. Today we've got huge floods in Myanmar, huge floods in Nigeria, huge floods in Poland, Czechoslovakia, Slovenia. People dying in all of these countries. 220 people alone in Myanmar today drowned by extreme weather. Last year in Greece, people trapped in wildfires. A whole village burnt to death alive. I mean, the impacts are on that scale.
That was an arson attack started by man.
Yeah, but the forests are tinder because of the lack of rain in the Mediterranean.
And poor forest management.
Poor forest management, but we still have the fact that increasing wildfires across Greece are breaking records. Of course, there have also been wildfires, but the other serious issue, yes, it's a systemic issue. People are dying already because of it, but the WHO says it's the most serious threat to human health. And the second thing, people at home in Britain are already paying the price. Why? House insurance is going up because of extreme weather in Britain. Food inflation, because all these fires and floods in our food baskets affecting Britain's cost of food. And thirdly, even the cost of buildings going up. As all these wildfires across Canada is making timber really expensive in Britain.
But more people might die in Britain this winter because of the winter fuel allowance being cut, for example. That's not an act of global warming. It's an act of mismanagement. And isn't that the point?
I totally agree that this is a stupid proposal. What they should have done, of course, is people who pay 40p tax could have had a tax. That would have been an easy way to do it. But the actual real issue, extraordinary, is that, and talk about people at home and people dying. Yes, 20,000 people in Britain die every year because of excess cold. What happened? Because we did not invest in insulation in our homes.
The fossil fuels keeps us warm, it keeps us alive.
The government cut the amount of homes we were insulating. We were insulating 2 million homes, Martin, in the early noughties. We cut it down to 100,000. That means
fossil fuels are saving more lives than it's taken. It keeps us warm.
11 million homes in Britain are suffering fuel poverty because they can't afford the fossil fuels to heat their homes. Last year they were hammered. Why? Because fossil fuel inflation hammered them. So we have to move on to green energy. That does two things. It's cheaper and it will actually save the planet.
Yeah, we're just getting warmed up there. I'll have to continue this conversation in the pub. Donica McCarthy, always a pleasure to have you in the studio. Thank you very much for coming in. Now, having a great show today. There's been some serious stuff. What an astonishing story about this Hezbollah terrorist attack. Over nearly 3,000 injured, 8 confirmed dead. It's been an incredible story. Coming up next is Jubes & Co, 6 till 7. I'll be back tomorrow, 3 p.m. Now's your weather. Here's Aidan McGibbon.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there. Staying dry virtually everywhere for the next 24 hours with widespread sunny skies, although some cloud will arrive overnight and that will stick around for some time through tomorrow. High pressure, though, firmly in charge of the weather at the moment, and that's keeping things settled. Weather fronts staying at bay in the Atlantic, and cloud-free skies as we end the afternoon and go into the evening. The cloud across northern Scotland finally disappearing as well, the rain in Shetland easing off. But another area of cloud will head into East Anglia and then into parts of the Midlands, southern and southeastern England, as well as East Wales. A few mist patches under that cloud. A milder night, though, where that cloud persists, colder to the north and west, with temperatures in the mid to low single figures in some sheltered spots, and a few mist and fog patches forming across parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England. But for much of central and southern England, as well as Wales, it's partly cloudy as we begin things, and that cloud persists through the morning. Northern England tending to be cloud-free. Blue skies also across Northern Ireland and Scotland, away from any fog patches. The fog sticking around until mid-morning and then tending to disappear, with the sun returning widely across Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern and Western England, as well as West Wales. Across East Wales into the Midlands, the cloud will stick around until, say, early to mid-afternoon in places, and even then, for the east coast, there could be some lingering cloud through the day, but inland, plenty of sunshine and feeling warm in that sunshine, with highs of 24, 25 Celsius across southern parts. And across northern Scotland as well, we'll see some warmth with highs of 22 or 23. Into the evening, we'll see further cloud arriving into the east and across central parts, and that becomes somewhat more extensive as we start off Thursday, and again slower to push back to the east coast. Otherwise, Thursday's a fine day, but Friday brings some showers to the south.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Johnny Ratner. The A1M in North Yorkshire is down to a single lane northbound between junctions 50 and 51. This stretch between Ripon and Leaving Bar, following an accident where one of the cars involved in the collision overturned. On the M11 in Essex, the motorway is down to a single lane from junction 8 to 9, heading north of Stansted towards Cambridgeshire, following an accident causing long queues of at least half an hour. On the M4 in Berkshire, the inside lane of 3 shut westbound at junction 6. The Slough and Windsor exit, recovery works underway following an accident. East London at Chingford, the Chingford Road blocked by a collision, and London Overground trains are suspended